Okay, those are all started.
5 o'clock. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody got outside to see that sunset. Talk of the afternoon or the last 20 minutes. That was pretty spectacular. I'd like to call to order the work session for the Frisco Town Council. Can I have the roll call, please?
Certainly. Mortensen.
Here.
Aronson.
Here.
Burley. Fallon. Held.
Here.
Incan, and I'm gonna make sure you're in there. Can you talk, Rick?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yep.
Incan?
Here.
Thank you. Sherburne?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. First up for the afternoon work session is agenda item number 1, and this is our marina plan. And turn it over to Tony.
Here, myself and Diane. First, I want to thank the staff from the marina, particularly our customers, Diane and Callie, and particularly our consultants. We're going to be discussing a lot of recommendations that are coming directly from their product. Edgewater Resources, Greg Whitecamp. I don't know if Greg is on the Zoom, but his report was very beneficial. Of course, F3 Marina, particularly Matt. To mention, this report shouldn't be a surprise. This is pretty in line with the F3 Marina operational audit of October 2020, which was then followed up by a year later with kind of a review of what had been implemented, what was outstanding in October of this year by F3 Marina. And then Edgewater Resources really helped us understand our issue with water, I will call volatility out there, and how we can address that long term. And then particularly the customers and our staff, almost all the comments we got, we talked to dozens of our employees and customers, very consistent with the audits and the findings. So I didn't find any significant deviation from their needs, their expectations, their ideas with also what the consultants were reporting. So it made for a fairly easy review. Again, our aim is to have an action plan that's really built on optimizing and balancing the core marina customer employees' needs and expectations so that we can ensure that they all have an outstanding experience at the marina. Because at the end of the day, when you go to the marina, that should be the bottom line, having an outstanding experience. So we're going to break this report into really 5 parts. I'll deal with the first 2. That would be the boating customers of the marina and the rental operations. Then we'll talk about the public parks and some of the major improvements scheduled out there and the employees' issues. And then we'll conclude with wanting to get direct feedback from the council from a policy perspective and anything else that you want to add, because clearly we're probably not going to be 100% on target. So we look forward to your perspective. As the focus, if you look at the master plan, they identified the marina as the #1 priority, followed by the park. We see them as equally important, but most of this plan is really built around these core customer groups. So the boating customers is roughly 160 seasonal dock slips. Historically, we've relied upon the Denver Water folks to estimate, projected water levels, and it varies. There's the fluctuation as the high water level is 9,017 feet above sea level. The base elevation is probably close to what it's now is at 9,000. Operational needs have to be at least at 9,004. So just remember that number. So this past year, Denver Water projected low water levels based upon their analysis. And if you look at our memo, they don't just do it themselves. They rely upon NOAA and other leading climate scientists to make these projections based on snow melt and climate and weather patterns. And in anticipation of their projection, the staff appropriately, with the support and concurrence of the consultant, said, hey, you're going to have to move the docks out to deeper depths. So they did that. And
This is exactly what I said. I said, she chose SNU because of skiing.
I am so sorry.
And, if we had known back in August
I'm
that
trying to
this
get
was
in
the
here and figure this
requirement,
out.
we would not have signed a lease
Hello?
for a year at in Incline, paying top
Cousin Sharon
dollars.
Skeen, I will stop.
She would have
this.
stayed in the dorm and
Stop.
we would have gone to UNR. No, it's, very complicated.
More exciting than I am.
Really?
No.
I don't know who that was. Then they have now muted
Based upon
themselves.
the projections of Denver Water and their associated experts, we created affectionately Dock Island this past year. Unfortunately, it was not an optimal experience for our customers, not because, the staff didn't try to ensure that it would be a good experience, but it's hard to put bathrooms on a floating dock that goes up and down every time you step on it. It's hard to have medical equipment accessible. They were adjacent to a wake zone, so that created disturbances getting on and off boats. There was good shuttle service, but if it was like, I think after 7 on the weekdays or 8 o'clock on the weekends, you couldn't get access to your boat, you had to find other means. So the convenience of just being on land, walking on the dock was not the same. And so we addressed that, and we gave based on the council's authority, a rebate to our customers because it wasn't the stellar experience they deserved, and it wasn't the value that they received for the money they paid. So I think we did the right thing. Edgewater Resources and F1 Marina now recommend that in 2022 voting says we should remain on shore and remain in place year-round and eliminate the operational expense of moving this dock system and also reducing the wear and tear as you're moving it. The dock simply will collapse to the bottom of the reservoir in the wintertime. And then when water rises in the spring and summer, it will be at the right operational level. And as an insurance policy, we want to offer boaters, because there's a risk. What we learned from our consultants is 95% of the time, based on the last 20 years of the ebb and flow and fluctuation of water, they say we are at operational levels. So 1 out of 20 years, we're going to come up short. It's not going to be a great experience. So if someone wants to, we're suggesting that we offer another 15 to 20 mooring balls. And so you can pay the additional costs. It's like an insurance policy that if it's one of those 1 in a 20 chance, you can move into deeper water. Most people probably decide 1 in 20 is not great risk, so I'll just stick with the docks. But some people may desire, and I think it's good. Wish we could offer more, but because of the circumvention you have to have around these moorings and stuff, you can't just pile hundreds of them in there. So 15 to 20 additional ones would be about appropriate. There's currently 40. And we would charge a flat rate of $900, regardless of, it's not relevant to the size of the boat. You're paying for a mooring ball that's anchored to the floor. And in the future, their suggestion was really pay very close attention to weather patterns, climate changes, and stay on top of what's going on, because we all know things are changing and not for the good. So really be very conscientious of that. We also are recommending, and we intend to bring the details back to you rather than get into the nuances of rates tonight, is kind of give you a quick overview of suggesting that simplify the rates. As far as slips, price by the slip, and I've just given you some comparative information. These rates are generally lower than what we're currently charging. The only issue might be, for example, I think we have 97 boats of 24 feet or less. And I think we all have 46 or 47 slips. So roughly half the people are going to have to go to a larger slip. So that's something you might want to consider. Personally, I have an issue being charged more because you didn't have the capacity to put my boat in the appropriate slip. It's like, overcharging me because you didn't have the right shoe size for me. So you put me in a bigger pair of shoes and you're charging me more for that. So that's up to you to make that determination, but that's the only concern we have. But certainly simplifies the rate structure. Moorings, $900, one price. Storage by square feet, not by linear feet. We have some issues this year, but I think those are going to get worked out so that people do get the appropriate charge. These simplified rates will not result in any significant changes. And I think, Diane will talk a little more about that. I think roughly 10% of the overall customers would be impacted, in most cases fairly nominally. We can address that further. Launch ramp, we've had that issue out there when there's high water in the early part of the summer or late spring. There's flooding out there. It is not a pretty scene. It's very inconvenient as far as launching boats and parking cars. And so talking to Jeff, and I know that Thad, he might want to weigh in here. He's been involved with this. And this may sound simple and it may not be even viable, but remove the excess water by pumping it into the Lake Dillon. That would be subject to the Denver Water Board's approval. It's not as simple as this. It clearly is groundwater. Unfortunately, it also has in it pollutants, and because you've got boats there and oil and things dripping, and so they might not be thrilled with that prospect. Other ideas, creating a containment and treatment area on property, sounds simple, but it's not going to be inexpensive. And there may be some other alternatives, but that's something that we'd like to address more thoroughly. But it needs to be addressed. It's not a professional look when your launch area is in 2 or 3 feet of water at times. So we need to address that. Parking people perceive as a problem, but it also is a sign of success. And the marina is very successful. So we got a lot of people parking there, particularly during peak periods of the summer. We have 300 spaces, about 180 are paved, about 120 are not. That's on the B1 parcel. So to address that, that was a constant complaint by a lot of customers that, especially boaters, because they're transporting a lot of equipment. They're not just showing up and jumping on their boat. They're bringing gear, they're bringing food, they're bringing beverage. I mean, it's a big scene when you got a boat. So for them, that was critical to make sure that it was convenient for them to know that they were going to have a place to park. And right now, because it's free, it's first come, first serve. So what we're proposing is probably putting out to bid an RFP to solicit for a third-party parking space manager for at least 180 spaces. You may wish to do all 300. Ultimately, we think the B1 lot should be paved. Then I think Andy brought up an important question, retention issues of stormwater. We're creating an impervious surface now, so that creates its own problems. And maybe you just want to keep it unpaved and market, maybe there's a slight discount for being an unpaved surface versus paved. But the overall goal is to have a 92% capacity. So there's always some space. It's not completely locked down and parked 100% of the time between boaters, visitors, and employees. And we wouldn't have gates or sensors. We would manage it through a technology we use in the police department currently, license plate technology, scanning. They would just scan license plates on a regular interval. They know exactly what license plate is where, when it got there, when it left, and you'd be charged appropriately. What we are recommending, because of the feedback we got from the boaters, is, and the consultants, they recommended the 70 space of 180. You can also see it as the 300. So that lowers the percentage probably down to about 25%. Be reserved for boaters, and they would pay for those spaces, but that cost would be imputed into their annual slip fees or mooring fees. So they don't get nickel and dime every time they come in and out. They basically would pay for the rights, and we would have to get feedback from you. We're thinking maybe 25% of the actual cost if they were parked there every day. Not that they always park there every day, but some deep discount for that customer base. Because you've got a lot invested in the marina, in that building, in that customer base. And then these are some recommendations we've received from some parking consultants that be on Monday through Thursday, 75 cents, seems rather inexpensive per 30 minutes with a $10 max if you're there all day. And that is quite inexpensive when you look at other significant marina situations. But I've been around long enough to know that pay parking is highly controversial, no matter what you pay. When people have received something for free forever, paying anything is too much. So I don't want you to walk away thinking this is going to be simple or not have some blowback. It will. But on the other hand, it's like tragedy on the commons. If there's no price structure, there's an overgrazing or overuse of that parking structure. So some people may choose, even at these rates, to say, I'll park downtown, or I'll stay at my house and I'll walk over there or bike over there. So people make conscientious decisions once price is introduced as to how they're going to utilize those spaces. And you tend to better optimize that scarce resource as a result through pricing. Friday and through Sunday, clearly, and holidays, those are peak periods. Rates would be 75 cents again, but only up to 3 hours, not and then $2.50 per 30 minutes thereafter. So for someone that's going to be there most of the day, there'll be a maximum fee of $15. Again, still relative to if you're parking in any downtown or any other kind of marina in the country, those are still low. But they're new, and so we want you to be conscientious about that. So what we'd recommended is you discount the boater parking. We also believe you should have a discounted, and it'd be easy to come up with a tag that could be put in the windshield of a resident or on their license plate. So a local Frisco resident could get a discount similar to what we're proposing for the boating public. So if they do want to drive over there, they're not paying premium rates. They're paying discounted rates. And ultimately, depending on the stormwater issues that it creates, to ultimately pave the B1 lot, it would cost you roughly $900,000. Jeff gave us some good analysis on that. And he's running a marks. My experience is to pave a lot costs about $7,500 per space. And that's exactly what that costs. On the rental operations, though we tend to focus on the boaters, most of the money is made by our renters. And so we don't want to ignore them. We want to really start, and Diane will talk more about some of the amenities that are going to be scheduled for that portion of this operation. But between the stand-up paddleboarding, the kayaks and the canoes, we generate about 55% of the revenue just from rentals, and versus 13% for the boaters. So though it's like Pareto's law, though we hear from the boaters, they're at 13% of our revenue and probably 20% of our customers. They're 80% of our issues. The rental business has been run very effectively, and generally the customer is quite happy. What we want to recommend is focus on the Lund House, making improvements there just for the rental operations, and hopefully one day actually have a new rental building, much like you've just done for the boating community. Replace the rental fleet on an expeditious basis. You want good quality equipment, and you don't want stuff worn out or torn up or broken. So because of the significant use, really turn that stuff over quickly. I know we talked to one operator that turns over their boats every year. Buy them in the spring, they sell them in the fall, and they find that that's worked out well for them. Also, for convenience of the business process and not causing delays in rentals, move to credit only and online payments, and also add GPS to the rentals. Why? Because of safety. Sometimes people get out there and can't make it back, and we need to identify where they're located. So that's a big plus. At that, let me turn this over to Diane. She'll walk you through the rest of this presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. It's great to see you guys this evening. I too would like to acknowledge a few individuals we have on the line tonight. Greg with Edgewater Resources has joined us. If there are any specific questions about operations, he is a great resource and he will answer those questions. Alan is here with F3 Marina. He's also on the line. You met him maybe about a year ago or so, and so he is also here. And then, of course, Tom and Jen, thanks to both of them for being here this evening. Lots of input from staff here on these next steps as well. So the park aspect, right? This is what Tony was talking about, that the marina is made up of course, the marina, the rentals, and the park. The park aspect, as Tony has already talked about, the goal would be to enhance the parking as well as the restrooms. We know that the restrooms are quite busy. This year we had 2 of the trailers that were out there, and they do get filled quite often. So This year we did resurface them more often, which is a good thing. We would continue to do that until we can actually build some new ones. We also have on the council agenda for this evening a contract, and we would recommend approval of that contract for design services for the renovation of the Lund House, the Island Grill restaurant, and the bathroom upgrades. That would take place in 2022 with the goal then of constructing that in 2023. We did some preliminary work with that a couple of years ago with Matt Stace. He's also in the audience here this evening. But we never took it to a completed design. So we had lots of ideas, came up with some good ideas there, and now we'll take it to a more finished product. We also have in the budget for 2022 to finish up the landscaping. So as you've seen now as well, between the new building, the beach, the slips, the Lund House, it's a big open field at this point in time. And so that would also then be working under Matt Stace with Norris Design and Elena, who's also here this evening, to finish all of that up as well, to make that look just a lot nicer. We have some images that we had shown you a couple years ago. We bring those back to you. And then from there, Elena and her team would take it with some great pathways, some green spaces, some shelters, things like that. And then we've also had some discussions with the folks from the Island Grill that should they also be willing to invest in some of these capital improvements, we would look at their lease a little bit differently as well. If they're willing to put in some money to make this work, how can we change the terms of their lease as well? Moving on to employees. We always say this, right? Our greatest asset are our employees. And I got to give huge kudos once again, Tom and Jen here. We have worked in the absence of a general manager for a while now, all summer long. And in case you haven't seen it or didn't hear, by the end of October, we did hit our budgeted revenue for this year for the marina. So huge kudos, a big thank you to both of you and the staff. That comes significantly, as Tony had said, from the rental operation, which just once again did extremely well this summer, once again challenged with all of the COVID measures there as well. So big thank you. So yes, continue to search at this point in time for a general manager. We have had some great interviews. We are still in that process at this point in time. Customer service, as you know, our business is built off of customer service and delivering exceptional customer service. Every year we work with our staff, train the staff. We'll continue to do so to provide the best customer service. Empowering our staff so that they can make decisions at all different levels and have the ability to come up with new ideas and us to implement those ideas as well. Continuously looking at quality improvements throughout the entire operation, to look at salary as well as benefits, right? And we're doing that as an entire town at this point in time. We're looking at all of our different salaries, all of our different positions, what our benefits are, the goal really to retain the great employees that we have, as well as to recruit new employees. Also perks, we've talked about perks before. We would like to bring back some perks that would be for marina specific employees. And those perks, though, would be very transparent. Everyone would be aware of what those perks are. They would be published, you would see them, and they would be fair. So we would bring those back as well. We've had lots of discussions internally, not just for the marina, but the town in general about recruitment, retention, new strategies, new ideas. It's a tough market out there. You've all seen that. You've all been part of it. The town of Frisco is no exception to that. We're there as well. The Customer Advisory Committee, this is an idea that was brought up from some of the boaters. Tony and I have talked about this as well. We would wait until we have a general manager on board to really solidify what this would look like, but would move towards that once we get a general manager on board. Continue with training, rewards, recognition, uniforms. We've always had uniforms, and the goal would be to change those up a little bit this year as well, or for next year. And then finalizing all of our standard operating procedures. As you can only imagine, as the marina has grown, has expanded, we've kind of got a few different things going on down there. So expanding those, our staff is working really hard on those as well at this point in time. We've got some policy questions before you. The first one really being about the operations. And as I'd mentioned before, Greg is on the line here with Edgewater Resources. You can take these one by one if you would like, and then kind of go from there. Great. So the first one having to do with operations. Does council support the operational recommendation to keep the docks in place year-round, thereby eliminating Dock Island? And with that, Mr. Mayor, turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Or to Tony as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Tony and Diane, for that. And Tom and Jen and everybody else, thank you guys, as already said. That was an amazing summer that none of us expected how busy we'd be. So I appreciate everybody's work around that. As for the first question, I am in full support of it. Didn't seem like Dock Island was a good experiment, and we acknowledge when we make mistakes. And I just hope that if we have the docks that we leave in place, if we do have extremely low water, people realize that that's a potential and boats might have to come out of the water in lieu of doing that. Make sure that's clear in the contract or the communication, as people do get slips. I just don't want them to then wish that we move Dock Island back into place so they can keep having their boat. I think we're going this way. Let's say this is what we're committed to. And maybe if we have to prorate or something, but the way things are shaping up, it could be an interesting water year.
It's coming.
So, yeah, but I'd be in support of, even not going down Dock Island Road again. Others?
Agree. I mean, to me, a bad water year is the same as a bad snow year, where it's bad for everyone. And when it happens, it's our job to message appropriately and have the boaters understand that it's outside our control what the water level is, and we all try to do the best we can in a bad situation, just like a bad snow year.
Super. I agreed. I think keeping the docks in place is easier for everybody, then that makes sense, right? I would assume there might be possibility of damage to them or whatever if the water was too low. But I'd leave that up to Tom to address at whatever point you're gonna do that. But yeah, whatever's easier makes sense to me that way. And yeah, I think if we, is there the possibility of at least initially early in the season, adding a few more mooring balls for like the few people who are, you might be able to cater to a couple extra people who don't end up on Dock Island and, as at the beginning of the season, but yeah, I think if everybody knows up front, then that's just the way it's gonna be. Low water year, you're not gonna really be in.
I think it's moving in the right direction. And I appreciate the comprehensive way in which, we arrived at these recommendations. I think it's like a very inclusive approach. So I've got a lot of confidence that this is a good step forward. I kind of, at the end of last year, at the end of the summer, or actually while it was going on during the summer, I kind of had envisioned an idea where we just have more docks that we bring into play. And the deeper, the boats with the deeper drafts would be moved out. So, and I want to make sure I understand this. Would there be, and Tom or Jen, whoever wants to answer that, is in the low water years, the water recedes as the water level comes down out at the docks, and the boats that now for whom the docks are not accessible, are there some mooring balls available for them early on, or is there no option for them? In other words, as the water level moves down, can they move to a mooring ball because we have some extra set aside for that versus Dock Island, like an auxiliary Dock Island? Or do they, because otherwise it sounded like they're done. So is there a fallback option for those deep draft boats?
Yeah, as I'd mentioned, that's kind of the insurance policy that you'd have to acquire early in the season. There's 40 existing mooring balls. We're proposing adding 15 to 20 more, but you can't wait till the middle of the summer to say, hey, I need a mooring ball. You effectively have to pay for the insurance of knowing that is a legitimate option for you if the water really recedes and you can go to deeper water. But we're really restricted because of the small area there to the total number of mooring balls. So if we add 15 to 20 to 40, so we're in the neighborhood of 55 to 60 total, and that's it.
All right, so that would be an additional cost, or
Yes.
based on what they're already paying for a slip, the assumption is that they would have a mooring ball.
It'd be an additional expense, it'd be $900.
All right.
Like buying an insurance policy. Sometimes you cash in, sometimes you don't, but not. But you have to pay a premium to have that insurance in place.
How much of this report has, there's this conversation about having a collective conversation between slip holders, people of the vested interest in the marina, in this operational plan. I know there was participation from those stakeholders in development of the plan. Have any of them seen now the operational document and had a chance to comment on it? Have we gotten any feedback on this plan? Yeah, I reached out to several of the more vigorous critics, to be fair, and they thought it was a very good plan and addressed and was consistent with their concerns, and they're very happy that it aligns with our employees' issues and the consultants' issues. So as I mentioned right from the get-go, there was strong alignment between what people perceive to be needs for improvement and what's being recommended to be. There was not much deviation between customers, our employees, and our consultants. So that was a positive thing. There was very little light between their concerns. Well, I appreciate the codification of everything that's successful about the marina. I mean, it's here, and the acknowledgement of need for transparency when it comes to total compensation factors. I think it's a huge leap forward, and as an operation document, really a super framework. The general manager comes in and the existing staff to have something, a playbook to fall back to all the time. So great work. This is really an impressive codification of the program out there, and I really like it. So, but and going back to the first question, yeah, there seems to be some support for that. So I'm not going to question that.
Jesse, you in favor?
Yeah, for the docs, yes.
Great, thank you. Melissa or Rick, do you guys have, go for it, Melissa.
No, I think it's headed in the right direction, and I support it. I think everything that you guys have said.
Rick, you good with moving forward this way?
Cool. Hey guys, yeah, I support it. I'm good.
Hey.
Volume across the board. What was the, what was next on our list?
Yep, great question. The second question has to do with rates. So we don't need a decision tonight from you regarding rates. We will bring this back at the next council meeting in December to go more thoroughly over those rates and the recommendations. But how we would like to move forward is to essentially simplify the rate structure for slips, for moorings, as well as for storage. And would you be in favor of looking at how we have traditionally done those, looking at it in a new way, simplifying it, and we would come back to you with a more thorough discussion about that on December 14th.
Just request, it feels a little deja vu that we're here again. Less than a year later, and the F3's report says, oh, our recommendations have not yet changed. And here we are, last year approving a different set of rates than we're going to be asked to approve now. And I think, we just need, please bring back the context of where that discussion went and why we didn't do the recommendations the last time, so that we're well aware of like the history of where we've been and where we want to go. I'm fully in support of simplifying, but like, let's not do this every year. Like, this is silly.
Because I thought we were here because of the
Exactly.
recommendations.
And we did do the recommendation.
Yeah.
And it turned out to not work. And so now we have to relook at
We-
what it was.
Yeah, we did a recommendation that was not in F3's report.
We tweaked the
Yeah.
recommendations.
So here we are.
And at that council meeting, Alan and Matt from F3 Marina will both be here as well if you have more specific questions about that also. So, yes. Okay, third question.
Yeah, Melissa, Rick, I just let you guys jump in if you want to jump in. Otherwise, we'll keep. All right, perfect. Thank you. Yep.
The third question has to do with employee perks. And the question being, is council supportive of perks for marina employees, provided these perks are transparent, limited, equitable, and managed? It can be used as both a recruitment tool as well as a retention tool.
Andy's jumping. Go for it, Andy.
Down with the bridge. Yeah, no, this is an important one. I think that, first, I'd probably like to say I'm sorry for how it all rolled out with how the perks were and whatever. I would definitely be in favor of bringing the perks back because a marina is a unique situation. You don't get the same thing when you're on the tubing hill as you do as when you're running the marina. And some of those perks are essential to marina life and boating life. And so those absolutely have to come back. Thank you.
I think we keep talking about providing transparent, equitable and managed perks, but I've yet to hear specifically outlined what those are. So I'd like to see those before saying yes. I think as a public entity, if we are going to provide perks for our employees, it should be across the board. Everyone should have access to the same perks, and whether you work at the marina, you get perks at the tubing hill or vice versa. I don't like to categorize them just because you happen to be a boater. And so I think there's kind of a lot of beating around the bush with this one, not really having transparency up front and us being asked to approve something that should be transparent. So I'd like to see a lot more on this. I'm not saying I don't support it, and I do see it as being very important for employee retention, but I don't know what I'm approving. And I think that's what got us into trouble the last time.
And we are not approving what those are.
Yeah, right.
No, we would bring
No,
those
no.
back as well.
Yeah.
We have to
Yeah.
hear what they are.
Yeah.
We gotta decide what they are. That's
Brings it
perfectly
down.
fine.
Sign a blank check.
Well, I think we never approved perks to begin with. So that's why we're like, what is this? So,
You can bring that back on December the 14th and categorize them, and you can kind of pick which ones you think are appropriate and whether you want to apply them. Again, that's a good equitable argument, townwide or just the marina employees.
Got a thumbs up from Rick. Dan?
Yeah, I share Jesse's concern. I think it's, in theory, you think about it, it's a great idea. Why not? It's part of, when you talk about the culture and what should be accommodative and what should not be. But at the end of the day, it's gotta make sense. Because I've always had an issue, across departments and across the whole landscape. Make sure staff understands that everybody's being paid really with the same coin. And that currency valuation has to make sense. I think not just within, the marina between tiers of employees, but between different departments across the town. It has to, and whatever precedent you set there, you need to be able to bring to other departments and evaluate the usage of those facilities in other places along the same lines. And it kind of creates this little bit of could be kind of a morass that you're wading into to some degree. So I think you have to be very careful. I think I'm very curious to see what you bring back, whether it's free or whether it's partial credit or whatever. But certainly something should be there. But I think it needs to be realistic and has to take into consideration wear and tear, and extra wear and tear, taking things out of play and things of that nature. So whatever cost is associated with the use of that amenity or the use of that facility needs to be incorporated into it as well. So.
Wes, anything to add? Perks, you could see the list.
I definitely think that some benefit, I need to see the whole package. I think those are some really interesting issues you all raise. I'm not sure until I really see what we're considering, how it may unfold, because it from my standpoint, it may make sense that a marina employee has a specific benefit to the marina. I just need to see the package before making that call.
We'll bring back specific
Yeah.
requests to discuss at the next meeting with rates. Does that seem fair?
Last question.
Simple one.
Parking. Is council supportive of implementing a paid parking system at the marina from what we would be proposing is about June 1st to September 30th? The dates can change, but are you in support of a paid parking system?
I am definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. like-
We're ready for it.
Yep,
Do it.
yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so a couple other questions then. Should there be parking passes available for the boaters at a discounted rate?
Are boaters meaning slip holders, day boaters, or
We
recreational?
haven't defined it. I guess boaters, we said initially 70 spots could be reserved for our boaters, meaning most likely our slip customers, and could be our mooring as well. You could go kind of beyond that if you wanted to. That's the initial thought behind this. Or we can define it however you'd like to define it.
And is those 70 spaces for the car that the person is bringing their cooler in, or the trailer? Is this separate from trailer space?
Truck and trailer spaces would be at a different rate.
But are they also within the 70 spaces, or
They're
that
not,
they're
they're
separate?
separate.
Okay.
Correct. Yes, this would be for your car.
my, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
No problem charging. We have precedent in Breckenridge for the last forever that you can charge for a dirt lot just the same as you charge for a paved lot. So I have no embarrassment to charging for a dirt lot. I don't fully understand why. I believe a boater should have a drop-off spot because they have more gear on a general basis. So give them a priority drop-off spot, but not 70 priority spaces that we're now taking away from our day users. So that's my view. Frisco resident discount parking. I don't think, because what is our goal of having parking? It's to have people walk. We want people to use the marina, but we don't want them to bring their cars. So if we give Frisco residents a discount, then we're encouraging them to do exactly what we don't want them to do. Get on your bike, have extra bike racks. They're free. Leave your car at home. I don't have any other ideas to explore.
Sure. Yeah, I'll second some of that sentiment. So yes, pay for out of town beachgoers for sure. I do agree that us in town, I can easily ride my bike down there, and I do, and I don't park down there ever. So I think that's what we should all be doing. Maybe get a little more bike focused in some of the finish out design. Boaters, I think slip holders should have at least some dedicated parking spaces. It wouldn't necessarily be for all of them. I don't know if 70 is the number, or if it's by the trailer parking and that's all just boaters and you're keeping pay parking everywhere else. Whatever kind of makes sense that way, I think is good. But I think boaters should have the ability with their paid slip to be covered there and to have their stuff close by.
An extra charge or it's included?
I that could be an extra charge. I don't know that we need to do that. What would we see from how many, it might tell you actually how many people are that interested in being able to park down there. I do think I'm against paving the whole lot, even paving it in impervious subsurface or surface, that would be expensive. And I think we could easily benefit. We got a price last year on mapping out the parking lot, so painting it on the dirt surface just to give people actual places to go. I think you would get more parking out of it. It would be less expensive. We would have to paint it again next year for sure, but we don't have to, pave that lot. I don't like the idea of necessarily doing that. It doesn't give us the ability to potentially, do what we need to do with boats and everything else on that lot, I would think. I think that was about it. Did I miss anything else?
Anything else you'd like them to explore?
As far as parking, no, I think the amount at this point, $10-15 a day, sure, that's great. But it shouldn't be that the beachgoers get to take over the entire parking lot because we have those other paying customers. Now, people who are dropping their boat off the boat ramp and they're from out of town, then maybe they can pay extra for the ability to be on the boat area. I think that's it. Thank you.
Let's keep going down the line. I'm definitely in favor of charging for parking down there. I think holding a few spots maybe for slip holders, but I don't see, the slip holders aren't the sole reason we have a marina. I think they get, I don't see why we cater to them any more than we cater to the people who are actually funding the majority of the marina and what happens there. And I'd hate to see 70 spots dedicated to them that would sit potentially empty. I think as Andrew said, a really adequate, short-term drop-off area where they can move everything they need to out to their slip onto their boat makes a lot more sense to me than dedicating parking to them just because they have a slip. It doesn't seem, I don't see the benefit to us, them, or the business model of rentals down there. So I don't see why we would go that route personally. I think.
Can I interject? Actually, maybe something focused at the rental fleet, like there's some parking spaces for just rentals. Because that way they can come down and they can get there and they can make their time and that kind of thing, and that they pay for that too, the rental price.
Yeah, and I'd like, if we can
sorry.
figure out a way to make that work.
But I felt like that's.
Yeah, and then I think, and I wouldn't even be opposed if, definitely not paving that $900,000, and we try to build the bathrooms. That's not even going to cover one side of half of what we need bathroom wise out there, and there's no reason to pave it. And if need be, maybe the first year we just see like maybe that's a split fee and the up close parking is more and the B1 lot is a cheaper lot to try to encourage those who might feel like, it's excessive or whatever else it might be, that we tier that pay structure a little bit to try to free up a little bit of the capacity and tight. Because if they're the same, we know where everybody's going to want to go. That might cut down on just the people driving around waiting for a spot to open up. That would be my idea to explore.
Yeah, I just echo what Andy Aronson said and completely agree. I have a big problem with a public facility catering so much to a group of people who can afford and are privileged enough to own a boat and be able to use a marina. This is not a private marina. This is not run by a private company. We are a public entity, and that one really rubs me the wrong way. And so to take 70 spots out of the potential pool of parking, whether they pay a premium for it or not, doesn't make sense to me. Dedicated drop off, I could see that. I don't think we need to pave B1 either. It's an expense that is just excessive and we don't need to go there. I do like the idea of tiering it perhaps to encourage people to park further away, because the idea of paid parking is that you limit the amount of cars and you keep occupancy available, right? But if you're all of a sudden reserving spaces that aren't being used, you cause a whole lot of, you have enforcement issues. You have, empty spaces where people could be parking. And I think you just have to have the full pool of parking spaces available to really make it work and to achieve your goals. And I keep coming back to the public aspect because, it was even mentioned here by staff that we built a new building for the boaters. Like, no, we built the new building to improve operations at the marina, not just for our slip holders who pay 13% of our revenue at that facility. So I want us to change the language around how we're talking about that new building. And I want us to focus on all of the users, not just the slip holders. There we go. I'm fired up tonight, you guys.
Oh, girl.
Look out.
I don't know if Melissa or Rick want to jump in, but I agree. I've always, it's a marina and a park, and I've always wanted to put the emphasis on developing the park aspect of that. And we've come a long way. And with regards to that and, the work Norris may or may not do on that open space, I want to make sure that we remember that we have an opportunity for wintertime activation out there. And that should be incorporated into any long-term planning we do. I don't want to put infrastructure out there that if something evolves out there in terms of wintertime activation, we got to rip up. So let's keep that in mind. But in terms of the paving, let's defer that. That doesn't, I see no immediate benefit. In terms of the parking, it would make sense to me. You've got a nice expanded drop-off area where people have time, a couple people to queue up to get the stuff out. But if there's going to be paid parking down there, the theory, I think, is that we're creating some capacity. And if I'm a slip holder, I would like to think that, discounted parking pass for the season, and then you can take your chances wherever the parking is. If you just want to drop off and then park at B1, and that's fine. If you want to have your discounted parking pass, so you have parking closer to your boat, then you grab a spot where it's created, so, and I think that's reasonable, and you either it's a la carte, you buy it or you don't, if you, so, and I think don't conflate the parking and the slip. Just let one be one and let people figure out what they want to do with the other. And I'm curious to hear what kind of feedback we're going to get from that. But yeah, I think that's where I am. It was paving, parking, and that's it for now.
I like that idea.
The pass idea is that's a good thought. I agree. I like that.
For anyone. Or for just the holders.
I'm curious what people think. I would think.
Yeah.
I mean,
slip holder
I would
at
think,
this point.
just
Oh.
slip holder.
I would like anyone, because
Yeah.
I'm a kayak user.
Yeah, there you
You
go.
go down
Yeah.
there on a daily basis. to
Which is like a slip
paddle.
holder.
Yep.
Yeah.
You should have the option for basically it's a season pass.
Right,
And it's not based on the daily rate per se. It's, you got to figure out, maybe that's what the consultants propose is how they, how they would structure a parking pass like that, but that's
Now
not.
I'll let Melissa jump in and then we'll
Sorry,
continue on
Melissa.
the.
Oh, that's okay. No, I think these are all really great comments, and let me go down my list here. So definitely no paving, yes to fees. One user group that I think that we're not fully acknowledging, and I would be part of this user group, is people that want to bring things like paddle boards. It's very difficult to ride a bike with a paddle board unless you have some crazy contraption. So, being able to have access to a parking spot for 2 hours, say, so, maybe some temporary parking, maybe that would fall in line with the idea of some rental parking up front. Maybe it's free before, 7 a.m. or something. I mean, I don't know, get creative with how to structure that. But, there are folks that, while it is easy to ride your bike and walk for everybody in Frisco, theoretically, there are situations with young kids, with, like I said, paddle boards, where locals do drive, and we do need to recognize that. So, so just having some availability. I do think that I'm with Hunter on this. I kind of struggle with allocating so many parking spaces. And if we do decide to dedicate some to the slip holders, it really needs to be justified. Is it based in data of their usage, and why, wouldn't a slip holder, many of them are residents, and so why wouldn't they be walking as well or riding their bikes? So I think to several of your points, kind of having a more open and equitable parking arrangement for all is where I land on that. The only other thing I was going to say was, it gets so darn congested in there that I think that we need to proactively manage it before people turn in. And so whether that's through, lot full signage, directing people to overflow areas, and transit connectivity, encourage people not even to bring their car, but find another way. I think we should explore all of those options.
Rick, did you have anything you want to add?
Hey, Hunter, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we got you, Rick. Go ahead.
Cool. Just quick. No paving. Yes, charging. I don't necessarily like the idea of holding spots because of the enforcement stuff that's already been discussed. I was thinking through this, and Dan really helped get me to this point of, I think a la carte for a slip holder, you get a pass and then you park free. But you have to understand there may be weekend where you show up and there's no parking. So that's got to be something that's laid out up front. And again, I think the a la carte really kind of buyer beware. there. So that's what I got. Thanks.
Yeah, that's okay. Copper Mountain is doing this year, which is all à la carte. You can buy a parking pass for $3.99 and you can go park in all the lots. The closer in lots are more expensive, the further out lots are less expensive. You know, this has all been done, but then we also have to enforce and collect for all of this. So, you know, we definitely have to consider who that's on, you know, how is that, you know, we're adding more, is that on, you know, Tom, is that on you?
Has to get out of the parking business.
Third party,
Third party does it
completely
all. And then
separate.
there's a contract that we would then figure out what that share of the revenues would be back to the town. No discussion about that at this point in time. But that would be the concept that we as staff would not be being in the business of parking management.
Very good.
Yes,
I think that was everything on the list.
that's right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To you on December the 14th, information on rates, define what perks are and who they would apply to, and then also get some, we got some really good ideas here on parking. I think there's consensus among the comments, so we'll weave that together and bring that back to you, those three areas.
Next up is agenda item number 2, and that is a short-term rentals discussion and options for potential excise tax, per bedroom fee, or a license cap. Please, Don, welcome. Yeah. Oh.
Never do that to anybody because I've done the paperwork.
Please be comfortable as we are. All yours. Thanks, Don.
All right, so this evening we have a short discussion on a couple of potential options related to short-term rentals. As we know, and we've seen in our community and many other mountain communities have seen, there's an employee shortage. And one of the factors that has been identified is the lack of housing. Lack of housing, there's a lot of factors tied into that as well, but certainly one of those is the loss of properties that were formerly available as long-term rentals are no longer, whether it's because they've become short-term rentals or sold as second homes or whatever else it may be. With that in mind, because short-term rentals are certainly part of the cause of the workforce housing challenges that we're having, a number of communities have looked at various options to generate revenue that would then be used to create solutions for workforce housing. And that revenue would be coming from short-term rentals. There's a couple of different ways that some places are looking at it. Recently, there's been a number of ballot issues that were approved in the November election by various communities to place an excise tax on short-term rental stays. Most of those passed. So I think you could make a general comment that the voters in these communities were generally supportive of the concept that short-term rentals do have an impact and that revenues from short-term rentals should be used for workforce housing solutions. Another option that's being considered by our neighbor to the south, Breckenridge, is a specific per bedroom fee, license fee that would be assessed on short-term rentals on an annual basis. This recently was at their most recent town council session on November 23rd, and I believe it was passed with a $400 fee for the first year, potentially raising up to a $756 fee in second years on a per bedroom basis. So there's a number of options that could be considered with that as well. And finally, there are some other communities that are looking at both moratoriums on short-term rental licenses, meaning a moratorium generally is imposed when you have some changes to your regulations that you would like to develop and apply, and if it's for a specific period of time in order to accomplish that. Other communities are also looking at caps. So a cap is a limitation on the number of licenses of a certain type of short-term rentals that could be instituted or allowed in a certain community or a neighborhood. So diving into what Frisco could do, and we've talked about a lot about short-term rentals. Most recent discussions were the September 14th and 28th council meetings. At those meetings, council had some conceptual support for a 7.5% excise tax on short-term rental stays. In the staff report, there's some numbers on what that would look like. That would put the town of Frisco on the higher end of taxes that would be assessed to short-term rentals, but it wouldn't be the highest. Crested Butte would still be higher. Regardless of that, a 7.5% excise tax would generate approximately 1.8 million additional funds on an annual basis, which could then be used to fund workforce housing projects. That works out to 7.5% and 1.8 million works out to approximately $250,000 for every 1% tax increment on that. So if it was a 5%, it would be roughly $1.25 million just for a level on that. STR license fees. So thinking about that, and again, I do want to make note that if Frisco was to pursue a license on a per bedroom basis, it would require a specific study and an economic study that's specific to Frisco and the business environment in Frisco. So we couldn't just say, well, Breckenridge did this number, so we can therefore take that number. It would require a specific study to establish that nexus for the town of Frisco. With that said, using what Breckenridge has recently adopted on a per bedroom basis, town of Frisco has 698 currently STR licenses at this time. That is a total of 1,688 bedrooms. So if the town of Frisco were to adopt a fee of $400 per bedroom, that would be a $675,000 annual revenue. 756, which was the high number on the Breckenridge fee, that would be $1.27 million on an annual basis. So that's on the bedroom fee. Finally, the STR license caps and moratoriums. So again, Summit County recently did a moratorium for 90 days for a specific purpose of creating changes to their regulatory process. With that, they exempted certain areas. They said it just doesn't apply in these areas, such as Copper Mountain, Keystone, and the Peak 7 area, because those are resort areas where short-term rentals are less impactful. So they had a very specific reason that they imposed a moratorium and a specific period of time. And they are now going through that regulatory process, drafting those regulations for consideration. Town of Breckenridge, similarly, they did a cap. In September, they approved a cap on the number of short-term licenses which could be issued in the town of Breckenridge. They set that cap at 2,200. There was a number of exemptions from that. So the total number of exempt licenses is approximately 2,476 at the time of adoption. So they're going to be effectively reducing 275 short-term rental licenses that can be permitted. That'll be done through attrition over time, through non-renewals, through property sales, whatever else it might be. But that should be noted too, that there's about roughly 1,500 short-term licenses and properties that are exempted from that because they're in resort areas, they're part of a timeshare, whatever else it might be. And there's a list of those exemptions. So looking at where Frisco is with our short-term rental licenses and everything else, certainly because of staffing challenges that we're having at our moment, we're certainly a little bit short-staffed. We're in the midst of converting software from host compliance to muni revs and lodging revs. We could probably, if a moratorium was placed, that could facilitate some of those processes. However, we don't have any proposed regulatory changes at this point in time. So staff is not recommending that council consider a moratorium at this point in time. unless there's some significant changes that council would like staff to pursue. With respect to a cap, right now, we have approximately, again, 698 short-term rental licenses, which is just under 20% of the overall residential properties within the town. So going back to Breckenridge and using them, since they've done a cap in a similar situation, their cap number represents approximately 29% of the Breckenridge residential stock. So if town council were to consider developing a cap on short-term rental licenses, staff would recommend setting that cap somewhere in the ballpark of 25%, as that would give some room for growth. It also would be similar to other communities. We don't have a lot of data. At the same time, I would like to point out that Breckenridge, as I mentioned, has a lot of exemptions. So Frisco may want to consider developing exemptions as well for the people that rent a single bedroom every now and then, or rent when they go out on Christmas break or spring break or whatever else, where their full-time residences, they didn't purchase the property as a short-term rental. So there's a number of other things that would go along with development of those of that cap program. So with that, I will say that looking at other communities, Frisco's short-term rental regulations are relatively simple. There's not a lot of bells and whistles. We don't have tiers where it applies in this neighborhood or another set of rules applies in this neighborhood or whatever else. Everything applies to all properties equally. If we could go down a road of looking at more specific regulations, as you're all aware, there was a ballot initiative that was circulated that proposed to do exactly that. That did not make it to the ballot, but certainly we will continue to observe impacts of short-term rentals in our neighborhoods to see if there are some changes that we could recommend making to our STR regulations to make them more effective and reduce the impacts to our neighborhoods. So with that, I do want to leave most of this time for you all to discuss and provide direction to staff as to if we were to pursue an STR tax, it would have to go to the ballot. And that the deadline for the April ballot is rapidly approaching. So we want to get ordinances on the January 11th and January 25th agenda for first and second reading. If you're not interested in STR tax and more of a license or a per bedroom license approach, we would have to commission a study for that and budget for that. So again, just want to get your feedback on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Do you have questions?
Yeah. Can you remind me how we got to the 7.5% proposal?
I actually don't know where that 7.5% came from exactly. I think it was looking at other communities. Crested Butte had a 7.5% on. So other communities had various numbers. And so we started with that one.
And then how do we get to 1.8 million? Like, are we just applying that 7.5% to the lodging tax that we brought in last year? Is that how we're doing? Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure I understand how we're calculating that.
Yes, our finance office ran did a addition onto our current numbers.
You mentioned roughly 20%, a little less than 20 are short-term rentals in terms of the total number of residential units in town, but we've often heard about the 65, 66% vacancy home rate. What is the discrepancy between those two? Like, are there really 40% of homes that are not short-term rented that are sitting vacant? Or they just haven't pulled a license yet? Like, where is that coming from?
So vacancy, the Census Bureau, they define it various ways. And
okay,
if it's not your primary residence and it's vacant. So as an example, my neighbors, they have another residence in New Jersey. That is their primary residence. So even though they don't short-term rent it, it is considered vacant. Their property in Frisco is considered vacant. So there are a number of those, and we probably all know several people.
a number of second homes where people might choose to be here for a part of the year, even if it's over 30 days, under 30 days, but that's being counted in that, okay, that's really helpful to understand. And then one last question for our short-term rental regulations, can you remind me, did we carve out like our hotels from that? And what is that definition? What is that?
I can read it for you, but it's under our short-term short-term rental licensing ordinance, and it is the definition of an accommodation unit. It is, I believe, anything that isn't a condo or a hotel and isn't an owner occupied as a principal residence situation. I will pull it up right now,
Okay.
but I believe that both of those distinctions are there. I'll confirm for you in just a minute.
Rick, any questions for Don? Then we can, should we start with the staff recommendation, or did you have something you wanted? Oh,
I'm
sorry, Melissa. I looked away for a second.
That's okay. Have you looked into, Don, this empty home tax, and do you have any thoughts on it? And I'm referring to what Crested Butte has done. I believe they passed a limited version of it. Do you know anything about that you could offer insight?
Not a ton. No, I don't know a ton about it. I will say, I believe that there was a two-part question, one part passed, one part failed.
Yeah.
And I'm not a lawyer, but there might be, I might question the whether how well that would hold up.
My
That,
under- Yeah, my understanding on that, excuse me, is that the excise tax, the tax on the privilege of owning a residential unit that is not occupied full-time or leased out on a long-term basis, did not pass. The second thing that I would tell you is the first thing I would counsel a client who wanted to adopt that was wait for someone to challenge this. I would put the odds of that provision having received judicial okay after challenge at about 50%. It is readily subject to challenge as a property or ad valorem tax masquerading as an excise tax. And as an ad valorem tax, it clearly would not meet the state constitutional requirement for uniformity of taxation among the classes. So it was interesting. I would have loved to have seen it passed and challenged and upheld, but I wouldn't have held my breath
right.
while that challenge was going on.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yep.
so to follow up on that, and maybe this is a lesson in Tabor and taxing, but like, how is that different than taxing STRs?
How is it
As a
different than
class?
Taxing STRs as a class. An excise tax is a tax on the engaging in a transaction of any sort. It could be a sales transaction or a leasing transaction. It could be the transaction of engaging in the profession of being a doctor in this jurisdiction, right? That's the distinction between an excise and an ad valorem tax. A tax on the transaction of renting an STR is not subject to challenge as an ad valorem tax disguised as an excise tax. This other one really was. It was a tax on the status of owning a residential property that you did not use as a principal residence and you did not rent out to someone else. So it was almost a tax on the lack of an action, which in theory, yes, but it seemed to me to be so close to simply drawing a distinction among the classes of residential property as to be subject to challenge in that way. So that's the difference.
Thank you.
Sure.
Chad and I have been working on this. I've had good conversation for what, 8 years now, trying to figure out how to go down this path as well, Melissa. And
I
Not
thought
there
Crested
yet.
Butte had the most creative approach I have yet seen. And like I say, flip a coin. I had the discussion with their city attorney. I've had the discussion with bond lawyers.
Go for it, Andy. Yep. Bring it.
Thanks, Don. There's a few things really, like short-term rentals in a resort town. I have a really difficult time with the idea of that, we're gonna limit them or this sort of thing. I do believe, though, that they should absolutely be looked at as a business proposition. And they should be taxed and charged as a commercial operation, just like everybody else who's making income on some sort of, service they're providing, right? So I don't see us actually implementing, that, because that needs to be there was a bill brought forward last year or 2 years ago, statewide, that didn't get passed that actually, said that. With that, what are we going to do to our short-term rentals in this town? I believe that really the only option here is excise tax, bring it to the people and let the people decide that if we want to make more money and put it towards affordable housing or put it towards whatever form of housing we choose. I think that's kind of the only way here. I don't believe in the per bedroom fee. Raising the STR license fee was entirely having to do with like, it shouldn't be costing us, right? So we have to at the very least cover our own expense of doing the activity, right? I don't think it needs to be raised beyond that. Moratorium though, I think, the moratorium, the way I saw it as when I brought it up before, was that can we give staff the space and the headspace in order to apply for the excise tax and whatever else that we have to do in order to get these things, going, or are we well covered for new license applications and everything else? Because we did hire somebody for that specifically. Is that person now doing Eva's job, or is that person, still just focusing there, right? What would help you is kind of the question there.
Honestly, so our Alexis, our short-term rental specialist, she is doing a great job managing that program. The conversion between programs is going pretty smoothly. So again, I don't know that a moratorium would really do much for us, except for probably cause a huge rush of applications at the outset, which probably would put us further behind in some other aspects. So I don't know that a moratorium would do us any good. From a staff perspective, I wouldn't recommend it. Unless, again, we had some very specific regulatory amendments that we wanted to explore and bring to council for their consideration. At this point in time, I don't have any suggested modifications to the code.
And with that, for the sorry, I lost my place where that was going. For you to be able to pull together everything that needs to happen for the excise tax, is that just, adding more into what everybody has to do and you still have to go mow the lawn?
Actually, that's going to do most of the heavy lifting on that, drafting the ordinance.
And then it's to the finance department for collection. It really is not a community development department.
You'll be adding more to Deborah's plate and to Thad's plate, and that's
only my plate early, and the long term, it will be the tax folks.
Okay. I think that kind of covers everything for me. No caps.
No caps, okay.
No caps, no moratorium at this point. No bedroom fee.
Running down a couple things. One is the one thing that I applaud Breckenridge for taking the shot. I don't like the excise tax. Something about it doesn't pass my sniff test of adding such a magnitude without kind of that process. But I do like the excise tax. I think 7.5% is too high. I don't see the need for us. If you said we need $1.8 million, then okay, that's our revenue source. Let's go get it. But we don't need that amount of funding. But if the voters are willing to offer us 4 or 5%, then I think that's appropriate. I do think my biggest concern, we live in the Summit County community. Breckenridge has just put a cap on. Summit County is putting effectively a cap on. They've first reading, they're limiting their homeowners to renting short-term 120, that number's I think being danced around, but somewhere around 120 days a year. So more or less economically, they're putting a cap on. The market of people wanting to buy units in Summit County and have short-term renting as an option has now just eliminated Breckenridge and Summit County, or Breckenridge and unincorporated county. So where are they going to go? So all of a sudden, we now become a dominant market for anybody in the Front Range that's looking to buy a vacation home and use it as a short-term rental. We need to be ahead of that problem. So I'm happy where we are. I think we've always sought balance of short-term rentals versus our desire to have more long-term occupants in our houses. But that problem is going to come at us really fast. So I like a 22 to 25% cap, somewhere in that range. Everybody who's bought a house deserves to have the economics sustained at the valuation that they did. So we're not affecting anybody who's already in. One other thing, and I don't know if this is the appropriate, but again, our goal is to increase our community of full-time residents. One of the very simple things that can help do that is I'd like to look into a program where we will reimburse anybody who buys a house here, makes it their primary residence. They can apply, if they move in as their primary residence in the first year, they can apply to the town and get reimbursed their transfer tax. And that's just, again, what we want people to live here. And these are just the little things we can do. I also feel strongly, we want people to live here. Instead of going to get a third job, if we can offer somebody the opportunity to rent their room, they're going to go back and be with their parent, be somewhere else for Christmas and rent the room for a ridiculous fee. I believe they should have that opportunity. So I don't know if that's a full exemption, how that works, but we need to allow people to maximize. If they've committed to us as the town they want to live in, we need to give them that option.
Short-term license.
A short-term, if it's your primary, well, honestly, if it's your primary residence and you have an extra bedroom, you are welcome to short-term that extra bedroom. If it's your primary residence and you want to rent the whole house 2, 3, 4 weeks a year, but it's still your primary residence by every definition, I think those folks, that's a hell of a lot cheaper for us as the government who's subsidizing so many people. That's a nice way for us to not be subsidizing them, but allowing them to receive the subsidy of the value of their home.
And there's a number of ways to do that. Again, like Breckenridge, they have exemptions for certain areas or certain classes, depending on how it's set up or types of properties. Summit County, I think they went to they've got a couple different tiers, and one of those is, I think there was a 30-day tier on a 365-day basis on it. So there's a number of different communities that have done a number of different things, and we can bring all of those back if council so directs.
Uh-oh.
Well,
I have an idea.
The councilor's discussion made a nice segue into the definition of accommodations unit. It does not carve out the home occupied renting for less than 30 days. In other words, it would be included within the definition of accommodation unit for which a license would be required, for which without change or further distinction or delineation, the tax would be applied. An accommodations unit is a separate and distinct living unit or area, including a condominium, townhouse, house, duplex, trailer, studio unit, lock-off unit, or any other such similar building, room, group of rooms, or any portion or room thereof or therein designed for and used as a dwelling, semicolon, right? So it was intended to be very inclusive with the following exception. Provided, however, that an accommodation unit shall not include any unit or area within a hotel, motel, condominium hotel, hostel or boarding, rooming, or lodging facility as such uses are defined in Chapter 180 of this code, so long as such defined use is conducted within an area within which it is permitted by applicable zoning regulations. So as I say, there is not a carve out for the owner occupied, I'm renting this room for less than 30 days, or I'm renting the whole place while I go on vacation for less than 30 days. You could accomplish it by way of an amendment to this definition, which would then also carve those folks out of a requirement for a license. Or you could define your tax question in a way that picked up all accommodations units except, and then create your own exception within the question. A couple of different ways to accomplish the same thing.
I just wanted to also bring up from that article that Melissa was sending around, Tony sent around, to check out Vail Indeed. It seems like a really great program, really interesting. They've put some people into some houses, they've changed some deeds, and So that, you know, that's something where we don't need to be recreating the wheel. It's a good program, seems to be.
We have that program.
Yeah,
actually.
that's the housing helps version 2.
Exists.
Yeah, okay.
Who's up?
You are, go for it.
Andrew, are you done?
Thank you for now.
You know, to kind of, I don't know where to start in terms of, I'll start with the cap, I guess. You know, I think I look at this from the standpoint of, you know, the success of the short-term market, how the success of that short-term paradigm, how it's engendered this economic boom that we've all benefited from. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But, you know, the downside of that now we're dealing with, and that's not just the lodging capacity issue, it's this real feeling that the town's full. I mean, we're done. We're, you know, we don't have room to put people, it seems like, anymore. And the experience here is being compromised. And I hear this from longtime locals. I hear this from visitors. So, you know, there's that other side to it in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. And, you know, I definitely feel like we need to explore cap. And Andrew, I'm glad you brought that up in terms of anticipating that increased pressure. I really believe I'm more in that 20% range because I think, you know, we need to really think about, you know, even another 50 units, another 40 units, how that contributes to the capacity issue that we have right now. But I don't want to do it without linking it to, you know, we've talked about this before, to really making sure we're really trying to attain a balance. And I don't mind putting a cap on something, but saying that, look, we'll release a license every time we create 2 workforce units or something like that, you know? So, and pick a number. I mean, 2, 3, you know, 1, it could be 1 for 1. But the idea is that you want, I think, the short-term rental community and property managers ostensibly to participate in helping to solve the problem. So if they want to create a license, we want to have them help us create some workforce capacity. And it could be, again, for the sake of argument, 3-month minimum or a 4-month minimum or something like that in terms of a short-term rental license that you release, as long as it's, you know, that 3 months is already committed to local workforce of that. So the idea is to with a cap is not just to limit it, but to also make sure that that number can grow as workforce units grow. Either we bring them online or they come online some other way. But I think it's really important to allow that. If in fact the issue is the balance, then let's keep that in mind and allow that some elasticity in that cap as long as we bring units online.
If I may, would that automatically happen? If we have, let's call it a 20%, because it's easier math. If we have a 20% STR cap and we build 5 more units, wouldn't that by definition open up another unit or 2 because we've just increased the number of housing units in the town?
It could, it's not mutually
As opposed to a
exclusive.
flat number. If we
Yeah,
said-
exactly. No, agreed.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be mutually, I think we can do both. I think we bring units online, but we try and figure out a way to bring another, to bring, and if we want to bring another short-term rental license online, we equate it to bringing workforce units online. So what that mechanism looks like, yeah, I think we have to kind of think through that a little bit, because I just was thinking about it in the last 20 minutes, so I don't have it fully vetted, but you bring up a good point. So, but I think that needs to be there. And I think that I have the same kind of sense with the excise tax, which is I would support a larger excise tax if we create an exemption for units that are committed to the local workforce, at least, again, pick a number, 3 months out of the year or something like that. So the idea is, because I do support an excise tax, not with a caveat. One, and I think that was what Jess brought up, which is it's got to be linked to something. I mean, do we think we need more money? Yeah, I think we do. But we haven't had a whole lot of success so far with the programs that we have. So I think when we start having some successful programs and some successful application of resources to delivering capacity, I think it makes an argument stronger. And right now, we haven't seen that. I think we need to commit more dollars and get more results. And I think that creates a stronger argument. But, you know, if we were to put something out there in April, for example, I think I could support something in the 2.5% range. I think having that dedicated stream will really help support the Housing Helps 2.0, the L&D program, help support Housing Helps, what I call the 3.0, which is the rental subsidy program, which I think really needs some aggressive marketing. So I would support that there, but I really think you want to use these opportunities to kind of create some incentive in the short-term market to get people to find ways to get their property into the local workforce, whether it's 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then help mitigate that excise tax if that's the case. I think it's an opportunity to do that. In terms of the kind of the ad hoc or that kind of, want to rent for a week because I'm out of town, a lot of that stuff seriously flies under the radar. I don't think you're going to you don't have a lot of people going to Airbnb and VRBO, paying the fees, getting a couple $100 license to rent their place for a week. I mean, I imagine that's going on right now, and you're not going to recapture a lot of that anyway. I think having something there is great. If it's just a, one-off application. Yeah, I don't have a short-term rental license, but I want to apply to the town because it turns out I am leaving for a month. Something came up. Can I rent my place for a month? Is that, I think having some workforce qualifications for that, things of that nature, I think are important, but worth exploring, but I don't know how far that's going to go. That I think is where I'm at. The last is in terms of, I know we're talking about the cap right now, whether cap or the excise tax, and but another opportunity to kind of push this, the Housing Helps 2.0, we're looking at some of the stuff, again, going to Melissa's article, some other towns that are just being so much more aggressive in the marketplace, getting in front of the deals, not waiting for deals to develop for that one qualified local buyer who might be outbid. I think when these properties are coming on the market, we need to be a player. We need to be, pick a number, anything under $1.2 million, we need to buy it. We need to put the covenant on it. We need to put it back in the market. Flip it. And we talked about that a couple of meetings ago, and having $2 or $3 million committed to that program, to having a couple houses in transition all the time, that makes it easier, I think, again, to go get that extra $1 million from an excise tax that's going to support your rental programs and things of that nature. So, but the stuff that's coming out there, we should just be on it. We should, put it, and then we can put it back in the workforce market with the covenant. And then people have time to get on that, So I had a conversation with somebody just the other day who's moving back into the Peak One neighborhood who had moved out. And she said it was solely because we created that 30-day opportunity for Frisco residents to get in there, and it limited the market just long enough for them to be able to put a deal together and get it done. So creating those opportunities locally is continues to be really, really important. So, but I don't want to I think maybe muddy the waters a little bit, but I want to use these opportunities to create that incentive to bring some properties, to bring some capacity in, because it's still the cheapest way to create capacity right now. Is the Housing Helps. It's, the workforce covenant. It's the quickest way to get capacity.
Melissa, I'll throw it to you. I'll just say that Rick's having cell phone problems. He can kind of hear us. He's in and out, but he's in agreement with the excise tax and the cap, and we can figure out the details of those in the next.
He is back.
Okay.
He is back. Okay, but go ahead, Melissa.
Okay, I'll try and keep it simple because I think you guys have covered a lot. I also am in favor of putting the excise tax on the ballot. And I think that one thing that we haven't, it hasn't really been said is, I mean, in my opinion, I think we just need more money and we'll figure out a way to spend it. And there's not really an amount of money that's going to solve our housing problem. So more money is good. The other thing that we haven't mentioned that I believe the excise tax would help us accomplish is capturing that true cost of the STRs, which would theoretically decrease the number of units that are being put into STRs, thereby retaining those in the local housing stock. And so I do support that, the idea of the excise tax. Whether or not it's 7%, 2%, I think that we need to carefully look at that so that it's something that would be, if we're going to go through this, it should be palatable, but also make a difference. I would hate to see it rejected outright if we go through the trouble of proposing such a tax. And so, I mean, just, you know, logically, I sort of fall in that 5% range. I think 2.5 is too low. I see the argument that 7 may be too high. So, but I'd like to really understand that before we settle upon something. So that's the excise tax. I think the per bedroom, you know, I can't put my finger on it, but it seems like there could be many ways around that. It could be brilliant. Let's see how that plays out in our neighboring communities. I do favor a cap on STRs, and that was an excellent point. I think that Andrew brought up that we're going to have added pressure, and if all of the communities around us have a cap, we need to consider that. But also, just from a sheer carrying capacity standpoint, we have identified a target that we want a certain percentage of our community to be full-time locals. And so we can look at that target and work our way backwards. And I think that at this point in time, you know, maybe that cap is 30% and we cannot exceed 30%. Maybe it's 25%. Again, I think before we put anything, before we decide upon anything or put it on a ballot, I think we need to really examine kind of how to fine tune that and what that really means. But I'm in that, you know, 20 to 30%, maybe 25 to 30% to allow a little bit of growth. And of course that would be offset, to Dan's point, by new units. You know, bottom line, I think that if a residential unit is operating like a commercial unit, it should be charged, the costs should be equivalent to that. And I do appreciate what the county has sought to do by delineating the various types of STRs. I think that's really worthwhile. I don't know that we're necessarily there yet, but there definitely are different categories of short-term rentals that should have different costs associated with those. So maybe something for a future conversation, but in my mind, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So I'd like that conversation to continue. Let's see. Interesting point about people who are already in. I don't know that we need to, you know, if we adopt a policy, I think that it should apply broadly to all STR units, to all homes. It's the evolution of our policy. We certainly, you know, if there was a home that was bought 10 years ago, you know, should that be a different fee or a different situation than one that's bought tomorrow? I don't necessarily think so. I think that we're all in this boat together at this point in time, and we all need to help bring forth the solutions together. The transfer tax, thank you for bringing that one up. We've been talking about that now for almost 2 years, and I really strongly think this is something we should bring back. The version that I like is just talking to friends that have lost out on houses, being sold to cash buyers from out of state to be a second home. If that home is sold to a local family that works in the county and some version of that, then perhaps we waive the transfer tax. I think that's a really easy thing. Lowly came up with that idea 2 summers ago, and I just think it's brilliant. It's an easy thing to shave off just a little bit and encourage our home sellers to sell to a local family. Love that idea. Indeed, of course, that's what our our Housing Helps program is modeled after, the more we can get local families in our existing housing stock, the better. And so I think all of this feeds into that programs that we can essentially put a deed restriction on an existing unit without having to build one. It's STRs offsetting full-time locals homes, and that's what it's all about for me. Thank you.
Go for it, Jesse, jump in.
Yeah, I agree with most of what has been said here, so I won't necessarily reiterate. I do kind of feel a little uncomfortable with 7.5, both because when you look at the comparison to our other communities, except Crested View, it puts us way, way up there. And I think just there's a perception issue. Even though we could use $1.8 million and put it to really good use. So I'd like to vet that number a little bit more. I think lower is probably better. And we really need to understand why we're asking for that number and not just because we pulled it out of the air. The cap is interesting to me. And I think I like the idea that it would, setting it as a percentage could grow with the growth of town and the redevelopment of town. But I also think that we have a problem today, and to allow for a lot more, I mean, 5% to me seems like a lot, and maybe it's not really in terms of sheer number of units, but you know, why would we allow for more growth if we have these goals to try and make, you know, our local workforce, or to have our local workforce live here? So I don't have a number on the cap. I think I'd like to keep it right around probably where we are today. But I'm not, I don't, there's not a lot of academic research for me that's gone into that comment. And then the other thing that I just want to mention, you know, we've kind of referenced the Outside Magazine article a couple of times and the Veil and Deed program. But one piece that I think we don't currently do, or we don't, if we do, I don't think it's out front and center, and that is Eagle County's Bold Housing Moves program, which is more of the local jurisdiction stepping in to help locals as a cash buyer, because a lot of the problem is that by the time they come up with a down payment and they come up with qualifying for a mortgage, they're out of the picture. And so how can we help locals who can afford it, but just don't have the cash on hand to come in beyond a down payment that Housing Helps 2.0 currently does, right? So I'd like to explore that more. That's kind of the first I'd really heard of that program. And so I'd like to learn more about that, because I think that there's some potential there as well. So, yeah.
Can I make another comment about the 20% cap? And Andrew, I've been thinking about your comment, and yeah, the correlation between the increase in STR licenses and total growth. But I think we want to link that to a certain kind of growth that's indexed more to workforce capacity growth. So in other words, if 5 market units are built that aren't workforce related, we're going to get 1 STR license out of that, right? Well, we haven't created any workforce. So it would make more sense if that were linked to occupied units, not, you know, does that make sense? And I'm still trying to think through this, but so that kind of goes back to my point about making sure that as workforce goes up, STR licenses are released. And I'm not quite sure what that mechanism is yet, but I don't want, if we just are building houses that aren't workforce related and creating as a function of the percentage, creating a new STR license, we haven't really accomplished our goals of creating a balance. So I think we need to kind of massage that mechanism so that it's linked to our, as we bring workforce online, maybe we do through the Housing Helps program, we create a unit and, you know, we build 25 units over here at Galena Street. As long as it's linked to increase in workforce capacity, yeah, we can create an STR license. That makes more sense to me than just allowing another kind of development to drive STR creation. So I don't know if that makes sense. But just to me,
yeah, well said.
So I'm with, I think I'm with, so looking at this and just, we're obviously all in support of the excise tax. We'll obviously talk through percentages as we work on that language. Seems like there's support across the board as well for the cap. I've always advocated for what Dan said, our two problems are not enough workforce housing and too many perceived short-term rentals. So I've always thought they should be in lockstep. I just think you make them both a percentage. So if somebody wants to buy and scrape a property and build 5 new units on it, and they want to sell those to the market that wants to short-term rent them, then they can go buy 5 mountainside condos and deed restrict them, and that percentage then stays in balance. But those are the two issues that we're battling. Why don't we tie them together for the foreseeable future? So I think pursuing that conversation would be good and seeing how that flushes out. I'm fine with 7.5%. It's a pass through. People never look at it when they book anything. Does anybody look at what they're going to pay when they stay at a hotel and they go on vacation? You don't care. You book a
Cheaper or
hotel.
more expensive.
You book it because you're going to stay. I think it helps us with the bonding. I think it helps us with being outspent by everybody. So I think I'm fine with it, but we can hash that out later. And I do think we should, Tony, work on revisiting the transfer tax idea and fleshing out the owner occupancy, because I heard that as well across the board, and make sure that we don't lose those in the coming conversations. So go ahead, Andy.
Sorry, that is.
Just a real quick clarification question. Counselor Sherburne made a comment that made me realize that I'm not clear on the following question, and I don't know if councils have a mind on it. And it's simply this, everyone on council knows that to adopt an excise tax, you will put a question on the ballot. To adopt a cap, you may put a question on the ballot, or you may adopt it legislatively.
Right.
So I'm just not sure where this discussion is on that question, whether the conception is that you would put a cap on the ballot, or the conception is you would consider a legislative
I think it would
adoption.
be, I was understanding personally, maybe legislative cap taxes as
Yeah.
is.
That
So,
was my, yeah.
Melissa agree, yeah.
Thank you. I just want to be clear because I wasn't.
For clarifying that.
Thank you.
Yeah, just quick, I'm definitely in support of the transfer tax deal. If we get local family in there, then we would be able to waive that. I think that's a great idea. Right now, our code, Don, I think is, if you build 6 units, one of them has to be affordable or workforce.
In the code, what we do have is a density bonus provision that allows additional market rate units in certain zones. We do not have an inclusionary zoning requirement in the town of Frisco. I think it's been bandied about a little bit. It's been considered, but we haven't received council direction yet that, yes, let's go ahead and start working on a code amendment to the development code to add an inclusionary zoning provision.
Yeah, I think we've been talking about that for a long time too, and we kind of don't ever get any legs there. And I think that would be key, because right now, if you're going to build 30 units, then we want to force whoever's building 30 units to have a higher density of affordable there than, short-term rentals. That goes partly along with what you were talking about, Dan. So yeah, just we should look at this comprehensively, and at what point and when are we changing what it says in the code in order for that to happen, because we're going to have Fox Hollow coming online, and we're going to have something across from the Summit West over there that are all going to be large, high density. So we're going to miss out on a few key opportunities if we don't move relatively quick there.
Good. I did have one comment that I did want to make sure that I got onto this section for the public record. When we came up with that 7.5% back at, if you go back to the September 14th staff report, there was an analysis of, if we look at our 5A revenues and our projected expenses over time, how those are drawn down and actually well into the red by 2024 if we don't find additional revenue. So there was some thought behind that 7.5% number. Certainly we didn't include a number of financing options, so that was just one snapshot look with a certain set of variables under that. So I'd certainly suggest, if council does decide to put a ballot measure on, we'll work with the finance office staff in order to come up with some of those projections and what that means and where those funds would go. Because I do think it would be very important from the voters' perspective to consider and know what those funds are going to, and we certainly can and will do that.
Appreciate that. anything else on the housing part? And I let us keep going because it was important and I think we finally got into
Good
what some of the conversations we wanted to have. So you guys,
Sounds like we have direction for to draft ordinance for January 11th and January 25th, first and second reading. And tax level, to me, it sounded like a consensus of a roughly 5%. Does that?
yeah, we can,
And Dan's numbers equal 5%. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah.
The higher that goes, the more I'd be interested in seeing some an exemption mechanism. And the higher it goes, I think it really needs to be more directly linked to successful programs that we've implemented. And I think for now, to Melissa's point, at 2.5%, I mean, just raising money for money's sake, just to put in the pot, yeah, I think we're gonna need it, but I've never personally supported tax questions where it was just like, yeah, you just let's raise some money, so I think we have to do a really good job of linking it to successful program. And I mean, Frisco's a very strong brand, very unique brand. People are willing to pay a little bit more about it. But Hunter, to your point, I know when I shop for hotel rooms, whether or not there's pass-through taxes, and I'm still shopping in an area for the best value. So I'm very sensitive to, seeing that inclusive rate for lodging getting up into that 15% range. I'm very concerned about that, right? Again, Frisco's a strong brand and we're going to attract our crowd. I'd like to think we're a premium brand and that we can attract a higher paying crowd. But at the same time, we need to be sensitive to this market and the fact that that is a big ask in this market to just raise prices 5% above and beyond. So I'm uncomfortable at 5. I'm out at 7.5. I understand I'm outnumbered probably, but 2.5, I think, is something that you're going to get broad support for. But there you go. I think you need to start to introduce some qualifying components.
so we can, because I think we're running out of time. We've got to start the next meeting. I want to make sure everybody has a break before that. We can put on that first January meeting, a work session of the actual percentage, and then actually have the agendized conversation around the ordinance. So that way we can work that out and have this conversation, because I think it is an important one that we all feel comfortable with what that ends up being. And with that also, I think the final work session on the draft RFP, we'll table that for another meeting just to keep things on schedule. Is there anything else?
Could I
Yep.
request that we move that just to a new business item on the regular agenda? It should be a relatively short conversation, and I would like to issue that RFP in the coming days if possible.
Council, are you good moving that to a new business item on the 7 o'clock agenda?
Will we
Okay.
need to take action at the beginning of the meeting to do that, to change the agenda or no?
Oh, you can do it.
Yep,
We
okay.
can do it. We can do it anytime.
okay.
By motion.
Yep.
Approval of the body.
Okay.
We'll move work session item, agenda item number 3 to new business. And we'll make that new business item number 1. Listen, with that, let's take a quick 5-minute break. We'll figure out when we're gonna eat that food that's out there later, but we're gonna
I've seen councils, they've eaten. I've seen
Oh, yeah.
councils eat in the middle of meetings. So that's not an issue.
Great.
Public doesn't care.
Thank you and good evening and welcome. Apologize for being a tiny bit late. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Frisco Town Council. And at this time, I'd like to open it up to public comments. Anyone wishing to make a public comment may do so now. Please be topic specific for nothing that is on this evening's agenda. Please state your name, your address, and keep your comments to no longer than 3 minutes.
David Rowling, address is 123 Rose Crown Circle. And it's a comment regarding one of the working session items. And it was Councilwoman Burley that made me think of this, because we often go to the marina with our grandchildren who are sub 5 years old, so all in tow. I would simply ask either the town manager or the council to approach Summit Stage to put a stop just on their summer schedule near the marina, because the closest ones are effectively a 4 or 5 block walk with a set of toddlers and everything else in tow. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Anyone else wishing to make a public comment? If you're online, you can raise your hand, unmute yourself.
Seeing a hand raised.
No additional public comment. I'll close public comment. And back to mayor and council comments. Go for it.
Comment. I just got to say, our town staff just goes above and beyond. We were out for Wassail Days, and we ran I'm still limping from running the Turkey Day 5K. I used to run, and it appears that I haven't run for some time. And now I couldn't walk for a day or two after that. But, you know, just the friendly faces, the level of organization, the people who committed their time to being out on the street after hours, late into the evening, early in the morning for these events, watching the public works crew clean up after the fire. It was just, I'm telling you, it's just amazing that we have the staff that is willing to commit so much time and make it such an excellent experience. It was great being out there for Wassail Days and just listening to the conversation. My wife was relating a phone conversation that she heard. Woman talking on the phone, trying to explain to somebody other end of the phone exactly what she was experiencing for Wassail Days out on the street Saturday night. And it was just like, this town is amazing. There's a thing they have wild, you go to stores and you get stuff and you go, and it's just, I think, exemplifies just, you know, what we're trying to do and accomplish with our branding and our events. And thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Diane. Please extend our gratitude to the entire team for pulling out. It's such a wonderful execution, and it speaks volumes for us. So thank you so much. It was a wonderful time.
Totally agree.
Yeah, totally agree. And along those notes too, also thank you to the folks who have now turned our lovely mountain town into the holiday spirit. The lights look fantastic this year, and I'm sure it was no small feat. So thanks staff and anyone who helped with that for how beautiful town looks right now, because it's really amazing.
If I could, sorry, on that topic.
Have to be sorry.
We are Christmas Wonderland. It's a beautiful place. Everybody loves the lights and everything else, but perhaps we could consider, and I've had some suggestions about this, some dark sky events or nights or things where we actually turn everything off and, you know, you can see the stars. Because there is something about Christmas lights are not dark sky compliant. And, you know, how much energy is that consuming while we're running after midnight, you know, and so love Christmas feel and love our little town that way. But, you know, if we want to talk sustainability, like how does that all fit in?
I would love to see them turn off at a certain point too.
Thanks.
I've got one as well, if I could.
Go for it.
So at our last meeting, as you all know, we agreed to move forward with the reformation of the Frisco Arts Council. And at that meeting, I told you all that I bumped into Dan McCreary, who walked me over to a statue and reminded me that that group originally was formed many years ago by his mother and several others. And I wanted to acknowledge his mom, Anne McCreary, who after that meeting, in the last week or so, she passed at the age of 99. Had a wonderful life. Was really a incredible resident here in Frisco. So I want to acknowledge Anne McCreary and her role in our community in forming the Arts Council that we're now reestablishing. And we also would like to, I'd like to propose, and thank you, Vanessa, for coming up with this wonderful idea. Actually, before I propose this, let me just read to you. Anne was a founding member of the Frisco Arts Council from 1987 to 1999. Under her tenure, 9 public art pieces were placed around Frisco, the first being in front of her office at 619 Main. Other notables around town are the Soaring Eagle at 5th and Main, the Ute Indian Youth in Frisco Historic Park, and the Rocky Mountain Bighorn Sheep at Summit and Main. And so I would like to propose that we dedicate the Soaring Eagle, which is outside of the town hall. It's in need of a little bit of repair, and it's and so in the process of repairing, I would love to propose that we dedicate that that statue to Anne McCreary as the founding member of our Arts Council. So I'd love your feedback on that. Thank you.
You got Andy's support. Looks like. Any concerns around that? I think that's great. Thank you,
And
Melissa.
the family is aware of that we're doing this. So thank you all very much.
Council comments. Definitely second everything that has been said, and amazing turnout at the lighting of Frisco. It's that has grown to be something that is massive compared to where it had been just a few short years ago. Kind of in the vein of Melissa's, I'd like to, I know that council's seen that the county wrote a letter to the governor requesting a mask mandate be implemented statewide. I would be in support of this council submitting a similar letter. I just wanted to see if there was any support from the rest of you to go that route or not. And it can be a quick no, yes, horrible idea. I just think if we do it individually, we're not going to get anywhere, and it doesn't help. And if we don't even want to discuss it, we can move on. All right.
I think I would
Sweet.
support it.
All right, sounds good. We can move on. Works for me. No other mayor council comments? Tony, are there any staff updates additional to what wasn't in the report memo? Great, thank you. Next is the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move the approval of the consent agenda.
It's been moved to approve the consent agenda by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Fallon. Is there any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Martinson.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Fallon.
Yes.
Held.
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Thank you. Sherburne.
Yes.
Thanks.
Next up is new business, and this is carryover from the work session. So this will be new business agenda item number 1, and that is the review of the draft RFP for the U.S. Forest Service proposal for the resource management in the Frisco backyard and a NEPA review. Done.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So you have before you, this is just staff has prepared a RFP for a proposal for management and natural resource management on U.S. Forest Service property. Because it is not our property, it does have to go through a U.S. Forest Service process and a NEPA review. So this developed over the past several months as an idea and a concept. Initially back in June, council had a discussion and a presentation about the Trails Master Plan, what we've done to date and some of the next steps on that. Some of the major next steps include the Frisco backyard area, which is the area at the base of Royal, and a lot of those potential trails in what is known as Planning Area 3 in the Trails Master Plan. Subsequently, there was the Summit County Wildfire Council had a meeting in August, and they were looking for additional ideas and next areas for wildfire mitigation. Council member Held identified the backyard area as one of those areas that could be really prime and use some additional wildfire mitigation. And during discussion with Wildfire Council, as some of the Forest Service staff are on that group, they had previously, just immediately to that, had conversations with our Trails Director Pete Swenson about starting to work in the backyard and the processes that would be needed to go through US to get USCFS approval for that. As a result of that, Forest Service personnel suggested that we combine both the Trails RFP as well, or the Trails NEPA review and a potential wildfire NEPA review into one big project and do that NEPA review simultaneously for some efficiency purposes. So with that, we did start talking to some experts in the field because none of us are foresters, so we don't have that expertise. We talked and we haven't done NEPA reviews either. So we talked to a couple of various people just to get an idea on what the scope should be. Ultimately drafted an RFP for that, gained some insight and approval and review from the Forest Service on that, and have drafted this for release potentially tomorrow if council consents or concurs with that. This is a budgeted item. It was budgeted for the 22 budget at the September 21st work session for an amount of estimating of $150,000 for the 2022 budget year. The project itself will take more than 2 years, most likely. So it's going to carry into the 2023 budget year. So with that, if you have any questions, just typically we don't bring RFPs to council, but since this is a fairly significant project, we did want to give council an opportunity to comment on it as the work session, but we moved on to new business because of time constraints.
Keeping this moving forward.
I'm happy to expound on any part of the process that has gotten us to this point. And I've been really involved in the Summit County Wildfire Council. I've served on for 4 years at this point. It's taken me this long, but all of a sudden, Frisco has made a mark to where we didn't before, and so. We actually had, we have the district ranger who is a career forester, is 100% on board with the idea of what's going on here. Personally, I think this is going to be our challenge if we are running down this road to mitigate and revegetate our backyard to prevent a catastrophic forest fire. Wouldn't necessarily prevent forest fire. But also to be good stewards of the forest. What does it mean to us for this RFP, good stewards of the forest, right? Because I can tell you that the Forest Service has a very different view of the way to go about fuels reduction, mitigation, and revegetation, if that's even in there. So it's going to be up to us to try to make sure that in the process that we stay up on what we're looking for, which would be to revitalize our backyard and not just clear cut the whole thing and burn it. And then in 5 to 10 years, stuff starts growing back with a portion per acreage of, of living material that they leave. Right. So at this point, we're in the planning process for this whole thing. And the Forest Service and Adam Bianchi said that we should pursue an outside engineering firm And that's where this RFP started building, because we shouldn't wait for the Forest Service. Per the Forest Service, it takes them too long, right? So if we are willing to spend the money for planning, which is one of the aspects that nobody generally spends money on, everybody wants to spend money on cutting trees, right? But we actually have to add these things into the equation. The rest of the equation is the revegetation, and that is now going to become my total purpose of this whole thing. Pete Swenson says that this process is now 4 years ahead of where he would have remotely thought it would be, only because we combined it all and we worked on it, and like the good work from Don and staff really solidified this thing. It really came out of the Summit County Wildfire Council was looking for new projects. I was like, hey, what about this? Because if I didn't put it in, who was going to put it in, right? It's that kind of thing. And then, staff and everyone else, massaged it to be professional enough that, these people actually all jumped on board. And so that's kind of where we're at. You should know at this point that I already we have already gotten approval for a cistern up North 10 Mile, because it's water supply for half of the town. And if that were to burn, it's an open water catch pit that would be inoperable. And so that's to be able to fight a fire over there. But the backyard, as we all know, if you've been up in the woods, it's full of fuel and monoculture. And, so we really have a long discussion, I believe, not right at this moment, but what does that mean for us to rebuild it back and actually be stewards up there? Like, we're going to have people up there planting trees is what I'm planning, but the Forest Service is not at this point, right? So there are things that, that we have to work out. The Summit County Wildfire Council has never looked at planning or revegetation. It has always been strictly about fuels reduction, period. And now, because of this whole push, they're actually willing, and they will provide funding towards the next steps and the revegetation beyond. So personally, I think this is our number one natural disaster that is looking us in the face. If we waited and didn't do anything and it burned, the loss of to our economy, the loss to personal property, potentially life, you can't measure that at this point. So I think we've been really successful in bringing something forward at this point. We're still planning. That's basically it. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have.
It's done. Everybody on council and support?
I just have a couple
Yep.
really quick comments. First of all, I'm elated that we're doing this. I just have the minor things. You used the word planning several times, Andy. I would just call phase one planning. I mean, of course, a proposal will come out of it to the Forest Service, but this is it's comprehensive planning. So that would be, I just think it encompasses what's going on here. And the result is a proposal, right? But there truly is, I mean, it is sheer planning. And along those same lines, so under the primary goals, so I'm looking at page 3 of 7 of the RFP. The one thing that I think is missing is resource management. And it's kind of embedded in some of these statements, but where do we talk about wildlife? Of course, that would come in the NEPA review, but get ahead of it. We need to think about wildlife habitat, resource management in the context of the forestry, fuels reduction, recreation analysis, et cetera. So I might suggest we add a bullet there that is more strictly speaking to natural resources, wildlife management, resource management, call it what you will, but I think you guys get the point. And then trails analysis, I would broaden that to be recreation. I think, of course, the trails are the primary thing, but there's skiing up there, there's off-trail recreation. So, and as it's written in here, it's, parking, restrooms, it kind of encompasses this user experience of the entire area. So I would just call it recreation and not narrow it down to strictly trails. But other than that, I'm really pleased that this is moving forward. And yeah, just great job, everyone.
And just to add to the resource management, I think the cultural resources in the backyard are equally as important to take a look at.
Yeah, it's a broad planning exercise, really.
Good comments, both sets. We did survey a couple. And since this was intended to be a work session, no action is required by council. So if there's any other comments, I'll take them. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy, for your help. Next item is agenda item number 2, and this is the Municipal Emergency Response Team, also known as MERT. I'll now open up this public hearing and turn it over to the chief. And welcome, chief.
Morning, or excuse me, good evening.
Oh, he needs coffee.
Council. The reason I'm standing here tonight is because the sheriff pulled out from this team. Now we're going to call it the response team, but we met John Miner, Keel Osborne, I met Susich and myself, and I said, we need to have a team. So town managers, and Tony's been very supportive. And they tasked us with putting together a new IGA, John and I, so we did that. And and then we sent it off to Thad and all the town attorneys, and they blessed it. So that's where we're at with that. The reality is that a response team, I'm looking at between 15 and 20 members. Had in the past about that number. However, we're not a tier 1 or tier 2 team. A tier 1 team, you have to, that's a full-time team. That's like Denver PD. I ran the SWAT team in Boulder for 20 years as a tier 2 team. That was 16 hours of training per week. But my point of why we need this, first of all, the sheriff says he has 32 deputies that are that can respond. He doesn't have 32 deputies. I put it right out there. He has 7 to 10. He's pulling away. We had an event, just so you know, on November 7th, starting at 10:30 at night. We had a barricaded party in the city market lot. He had beat up his girlfriend, he had strangled her. Now we got over there and we pinned the car in. We actually had to make entry through the sliding glass, or it's not the sliding glass, the side window. He had a tack vest on, so we thought he was armed. Well, he's lucky he didn't get shot. That took us until 4 a.m. John, the last officer and another officer from the SO covered the rest of the county, the entire event, and it went from at 10:43, and then, by the way, this went on at 10:24 a.m. At 10:43 p.m. there was a domestic on Galena Street. Those 2 officers handled that. At 11:13, there was a stolen vehicle from Breck. They handled that. Then they went to a threats call here on East Main Street, and they handled that. And then they went on a welfare check, a reckless driver, and then another disturbance, and they went to Keystone. Now, it just seems to follow reason if you have a SWAT team, or excuse me, a response team, you get this car from them, they start calling these folks in, right? They can relieve the officers. It doesn't make sense the angle they're coming at. So anyway, get off my soapbox. The reality is we need this team. With that, Breckenridge told me that he doesn't want to be part of this team because he has turnover. I said, well, welcome to the club. We all have turnover, for God's sake. You got to keep training and pushing it forward. And I'm convinced and I'm confident that we'll have a good team. It's going to take a while because we want you guys to massage this. And, you know, the reason that we're asking this is because we're going to ask for some money. I'm going to probably have 5 guys on the team, $1,000 a head for uniforms and stuff like that. But then it'll go down. We're going to meet every June and July and figure out how much we need. We've got equipment from the last team. We got a 50 caliber, pierce through anything. We've got a MRAP vehicle. It's gonna take some time to work this out, but you know, we'll be professional, work it out. But I'm 100% behind this. I think it will work.
Any specific questions for the chief at this time?
I do have just a operational question, trying to wrap my head around who serves on this team. So, you know, you had mentioned you call in the team and then it relieves the officers to be able to go patrol the rest of town, but aren't some of those officers serving on the team? So how does that free up space if they're actually serving on the team too?
It's funny that none of those guys were ever on the team that handled this event.
Okay.
So let's say hypothetically that we have 4 or 5 guys on our team. And it's, you know, we work 2 shifts, Wednesday's the overlap day. And let's say that the call comes out on a Saturday night. We'll have officers on the front half of the week that will come in and report to the scene, the incident command post. And then it's like when we had the guy up at Wilderness that had the rifle a few years back. As the SWAT team came in, we relieved our officers that were on scene. And they moved into the inner perimeter where they could take the shot at this guy if he started firing his weapon. Fortunately, he didn't. But then we relieved all those officers because the SWAT team, excuse me, it's not the SWAT team. The response team, emergency response team will be available to do this type of stuff. And the other thing I wanted to mention to you is I brought that up. I mentioned this in the article. If you want to get good at golf, and Dan's good, because I've golfed with him, he kicked my butt. How many times you got to hit a golf ball? You got to hit it thousands of times. If you want to be good as a SWAT member, you have to do repetitions. You have to clear a room hundreds of times. You got to know where everybody's going to go. The idea of training up everybody for a SWAT class is great. This sheriff did. Got all those people trained up with SWAT because he brought some guys in from LA where he used to work, right? But what does that have to do with repetition? How does that figure into the equation of you got someone on a situation with a hostage, you got to go into that house and you're not knowing what the other guy's going to do. When I was on the SWAT team, we would mark out in the basement, big, huge asphalt basement where we parked. We would mark out the interior of the home. We had negotiators on scene. We continually repeat the movement we're going to do in this house. Therefore, when we executed in this movement, but you have to have repetition to be successful, is my point. Enough of that. Did I answer your question?
Kind of, but I'll let the
Circle back.
discussion keep going. Yeah, go ahead.
So, just help me understand, because it's collaboration seems like it should always be a good thing within neighboring police departments. If we have an incident in this building, meaning town of Frisco, within the town of Frisco, obviously, I'm understanding that the members of this response team will all support the event.
Yes.
Does this mean that the county will not? And the same question is the reverse. If there's a Summit High School event that is not within any jurisdiction of this agreement, does this mean we don't support it?
No, in fact, I have told my officers, if there is a situation that is a crisis, you will go. And if you don't go, you won't work for me. I finally got John Miner on board with that. I know Kale is from the Dillon Police Department. That's, it's Blue River. It's kind of small. He's got like 3 officers, but no, we're always going to go. In fact.
But are they always going to come?
Yes. All the deputies. They want to be part of this team.
I guess I'm really concerned about the county being on the outside of this. How does that impact an event that takes place in Frisco? Are they going to come?
the officer, the deputies will respond. We had a small domestic call this morning. Deputy covered our officer. Because our or our morning shift guy hadn't gotten in at 11 o'clock, went down about 8:30. So the deputy covered our cop. I'm gonna tell you something, the line working officers in this county, terrific. Terrific people. They'll bend over backwards, they'll do anything for anybody. And as you go up the chain, there are some of us at the top of the chain that will help out. I can't speak for those two guys. And I don't want to make it us versus them, but you know, we've got it in the MERT, and Tony brought this up. You guys want it going, you can.
Thanks.
So Jessica, back to your question. I put my head around this. So you got an incident and you've got 10 officers in the county on patrol and they all go. Then we send out the red alert to the response team, they'll be coming in. As they come in, those guys can filter out and then handle the rest of the county. Does that make sense?
You're calling them in
Yeah.
from off duty essentially to.
Yeah, you're
so
calling, I guess that's the point. You're
Yeah.
calling them in from off duty, because in my mind, it's like, how are you not double dipping
No.
your officers who
No.
are already there? But it's an off, yeah,
It's
you're
calling
calling
it-
them
yeah,
in.
They're
from
on
an
call
off-
once
okay.
they're on this program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Search and rescue.
Yep.
yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That
Sorry.
makes sense.
Other questions for the chief?
Chief, you know, I read the article, of course, it was included, and the concerns that were postulated by, you know, by county and by BRAC in terms of frequency versus import. Frequency, like the frequency of the use versus the commitment of time and resources and the use. Can you just address this idea that, oh, well, we can use the team from Jeffco, we can use the team from somewhere else, we can sit and wait while this other team mobilizes to come help us. Can you address that in terms of its relative consequence?
Well, where I used to work for Denver, but let's say I was working in Salida, and there was an active shooter. I'm a SWAT officer, and they call him the Buena Vista SWAT team. They go in and handle business. I'd be damn embarrassed. That's my first thought. In terms of frequency, we have a lot of stuff going on in this town and in the county. We don't make it, I mean, we don't put it on the front page. This is a community. Biking and happiness. We don't want to be a. We have a lot of stuff going on, Dan, and you know, it would help us tremendously if we had a team. Now, we did have a team. Whatever they tell you, we had a team up until April. And they were ready to respond. But, you know, politics.
Well, then, no, I think you're getting, and the question was kind of meant to, you know, I just wanted you to address those concerns that were raised publicly in that article in terms of at least from the perspective that I understood it, was the lack of relevance of the team because of, and I just wanted you to kind of speak to that. But, you know, what is the mechanism that keeps the leadership and organization and mission goals aligned across the towns? What is the operating mechanism that's employed? And how do you guys work together to make sure that, as Andrew brought up, that the teams are involved, that you guys are respectful of each other's jurisdiction and agency in a situation? How does that work?
Well, first of all, there's no jurisdiction. I mean, technically there is, but we're there for everybody. We're gonna go. We need all the support we can get from each other. But I think what you're talking about falls under this National Tactical Response Operations Standards, which talks about the equipment training, talks about priorities of life. You know, I'm just trying to give you kind of an overall picture here. Part of life utilizes the structure of ranking individuals in numerical order and priority. Number 1, hostage. Number 2, innocent civilians. Number 3, law enforcement. Number 4, suspect. So there are guiding principles put down by the National Tactical Officers Association that we follow. And so priority of life is 1. For instance, the situation over in Wilderness, the guy wanted to talk to a priest, and I became a priest. And got him out of the house. He put the weapon down. So working in terms of the county, in terms of the line level, we're all working together. We get into difficult conversations at the top. We're all here for the same mission. But I can get down in the weeds with you a little bit later on this stuff.
No, I think you're speaking to it, just trying to understand in, real world, how you guys are communicating with each other, not necessarily in an incident specific situation, but organizationally, how you keep it moving and keep your ability to execute at a high level. How does that, who's talking to who, and what does that organizational scheme look like?
Well, we do have monthly chiefs meetings, and we do have monthly sergeant meetings. I mean, that's one thing we do. We don't have a detective yet. Hopefully we'll get the detective. They'll be involved with the district attorney's office, going over cases. And then they also meet monthly. But we're always talking.
Okay.
May not be good, but we're talking.
Okay. Yeah, talking is good.
No, personally, I think we have to support the need. You in this situation, you can't, you completely discount everything if you're like, well, nothing ever happens, because as soon as something happens, as soon as you're not prepared for that thing to happen, well, then you just screwed the pooch. Sorry, pardon that. But the thing is, these guys are working at a high level in an area where they should have all the training possible. They should be striving for that next level, that next step. The county and everybody should be working together, but hopefully maybe we can be part of a program that they would end up wanting to join. Because, we could get beyond the politics and we could say, we're going to be effective in these ways. Who else, do we need psychologists on that team too? Right? Do we need, I don't know, and you don't have to answer that, but, do we need, do we need buy-in from State Patrol too? Do we need everybody else, every service working together? I think we do, but if we don't have that, we should try to do what we can do and hopefully create something that everybody else wants to be part of. And
point, Andy, we've tried to get State Patrol on with us, and they don't have enough people up here. They've got
is that all they have?
You guys know this, and I'm speaking to the choir, but we're hurting coast to coast with officers. It's just not cool to be a cop.
Tough profession.
Go out there and we're respectful of everybody. But if you want to mess with us, yeah, good luck.
Do you think this would help with retention, potentially?
Yeah, I think it will give us another area that they can focus on and become part of. I mean, I can't see First of all, we're gonna get everybody SWAT trained in the department. Eventually. And I cannot see, obviously we'll have a core, but the other people can be a part of it as well.
Would there be like hazard pay for, you have to get out of bed to go to Walmart to deal with this situation? Is that a strictly
I
volunteer
think-
situation?
I think that this idea of hazard pay is a bunch of malarkey. Just like when we had the COVID, we had someone say we should get hazardous pay, not from our agency, not from our department. That's crap. There was a person that had COVID that needed to be transferred, and I said, I'll do it. She's like, oh my God, why are you gonna do that? How are you gonna do that? And I said, I'm put a mask on. I'm gonna drive him home. That's how simple this is. Everybody gets so caught up in this stuff. Just do your job. But if you want to give us hazard pay, Tony, we'll take it.
In some case, it's over and above, expected duty, and I would think there should be some compensation personally, but if that's not the norm, or if that's not what you think you need, then I want to support the situation personally.
I'll go ahead and open up to public comment. Anyone wish to make public comment at this time? All right.
Hi, Callie Rushton, just resident of Frisco, employee here at Town of Frisco. This is all new to me with you guys and seeing kind of what rolls under the belt of council, and really impressive how you guys pick things apart, and really try to focus on so many different areas that really do impact us that lots of people don't think about. Just shooting off from the MERT standpoint here, I did spend a short time of my first career here in Frisco with the police department. So I learned a lot. It was brand new to me. Nothing I had been in before. But I can say these guys are busy. As much as, things go on around here, it's such a hub to hop on the highway for things to happen and shoot different directions, and I do know just the amount of effort and time these guys put in when it doesn't make the front page. No one here knows crack really about what kind of goes on. They handle the business and they keep it quiet. It's not to go off and broadcast what's happened. It's not in what I can say the DNA of what I've seen with some of our officers in our department. I'm super thankful for them and for the town. And I think, just working together, and I do see some of the politics coming from some of the bigger arenas. And, these guys will be there no matter what. And, having someone, it kind of rolls with the backyard RFP. We have fire, something tremendous like that happen. Where's that support going to come from? Again, with the weather or the roads or whatever might be happening. I feel more secure of knowing that I've got some pretty good help here in the background. Rolling along with housing, keeping our officers here is really hard. We've got a great big handful that drive from Denver, trying to open the doors for them to be able to have housing here so they don't transfer somewhere else is big. So all those kind of doors open to each other, and so just kind of opening that view and just, like I said, appreciating where all your minds shoot off in different directions, just to support the town, I think is really big. So thank you.
Else wish to make public comment? Yep, David.
2-3 Rose Crown Circle. I didn't know this topic was going to come up, but I will say this. I never worry at night in the town of Frisco. And it becomes because of him and his officers. So if there's an ask, and this seems very reasonable, as a citizen, it's not just yes, but hell yes, in support of them. We do have a great community, and I didn't know, and I sleep well at night, not knowing everything that they're doing for us. Anyways, that was all. Thanks.
Is there anyone online wishing to make public comment? Didn't see any. Deborah, did you?
Hands raised.
Public comment. Back to council discussion, and I would just have to say that, I think of a different look into some of what goes on based on some of my evening exploits on search and rescue, and I hear all of the police activity on the radio. But if none of you, and this is for everyone in the room, if you haven't taken advantage of doing a ride along with one of our officers, especially on a busy weekend night, please do so. Your eyes will be opened as to what goes on in this county, and as what Callie mentioned and the chief has mentioned, they are busier than you would ever know. And also, as the chief mentioned, there's never a time where if something happens that the officers throughout this county won't put down everything to go help each other or help whatever that need is. And it's remarkable to see how quickly they respond to help each other out to make things better. So if you do a good ride along, you'll see that pretty quickly. You might end up in Keystone or Blue River in a Frisco PD car, and that's pretty regular because that's the support we have. So I'm sorry we're at this point. I have participated in some of the SWAT trainings in the past with the team, and it was a phenomenal team. And I think a credit to their professionalism comes from the repetitive training that they get. And I think to support that for our officers and the people they'll be working with in the other communities will help bolster their professionalism and their ability to do their jobs for everyone. So I wish we weren't having to do this. I wish we were back to where we were, but we're not. And I'm in full support of this ask and moving forward with this IGA. So I'd love to know if there's any other comments or perhaps motion.
I will. Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve, is this on first reading? Or is this a resolution? What's that? All right. Make a motion to approve the agreement for the municipal emergency response team. Agenda item number 2 in this case tonight.
Move to approve by Councilmember Fallon. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Held. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, can you call the question, please?
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Fallon.
Yes.
Held.
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Sherburne.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
And do go for a ride along. Call them up. They'll get you in a car. Next up is agenda item number 3, and this is resolution 21-26, approval of a contract with Plummer and Associates for the design and permitting of a PFAS treatment at well number 7. I'll open up the public hearing and turn it over to staff and Tony.
Jeff, or at least he was online. I know he had some ill health, but let me just paraphrase. PFAS was going.
I'm here.
Oh, you're right there? Okay. Then why don't you roll with it?
No.
Jeff? I won't steal your thunder.
Okay. No, that's okay. Thank you, Tony. Good evening,
Okay.
Mayor and Council. This item before you tonight is a resolution to approve a contract with Plummer and Associates, our current water engineer, to design removal treatment to remove PFAS from well number 7. You've got my memo. I can certainly answer any questions, or we can really get really deep in the weeds with this stuff. But in a nutshell, PFAS was detected in well 7. And basically its source is more than likely the fire training center. They used to use firefighting foam there. They no longer use it, but it had been used there for years, and it did leach down into the groundwater. Well 7 is directly across the highway from the fire training center. So we are assuming right now that's where that plume is coming from. The county and the state are doing further testing in the Bills Ranch area to really determine that. But this has really come to the forefront lately. The EPA is looking into this and looking into a maximum contaminant level of more than likely 0 because it's a carcinogen, and the EPA tends to really like to make those contaminant levels 0 or something real close to 0. So this proposal tonight will get us design and treatment design and approval from the state to do our best. I can't say we'll move down to 0, but our goal will be to remove any PFAS substances all the way down to a non-detectable level. And that's what this proposal will do, is come up with a design, actually come up with construction drawings and permitting so that we can be ready with a shovel-ready project to actually build and we could get some grant money out of it. So I'll leave it at that. If there's any questions, this is a pretty difficult subject, but I'm happy to answer them.
Questions?
I have a question. I have two questions. Sorry, we have so many wells and different sources. I get confused as to what's in production and what's not. Is well 7, are we using it right now or not using it right now? What's the status of this well?
Well 7 is one of our primary sources of water, especially during snowmaking at the Tubing Hill.
Okay, yikes. Thank you. And the second question is, if we determine where this came from, will they be contributing to the cleanup? Meaning the fire department or the county?
I don't have an answer to that question, but I do know that the state has a fund that some of these departments have paid into to help with mitigation. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to the question, but there are grants and loans available through the EPA and the state health department to help us pay for this treatment.
I mean, obviously this needs to be done, but I just, we see people use these toxins and carcinogens, and then whether it's through an inability to understand where it came from, or agencies go bankrupt and then don't have to take responsibility for it. But to the extent we can, if we know where this is coming from, I think we should at least make the ask.
Understood.
Other questions? I'll open it up to public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment? Do so now. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Back to council discussion. And I would say, I know Jeff and crew have put a lot of work into this recently to come up with a plan. But for those who weren't aware, when we first detected these out of that well, Vanessa and her, the communications department, have become also in-house resident experts on PFAS, and have done a great job communicating with, if you've seen the flood of requests for information and interviews around this issue, it is very much in the forefront of a lot of people's minds and concerns. So I think we're smart to be ahead of this and working on it and acknowledge it and be open about it. Other communities are not doing as much as we are. So I think I appreciate all of staff's willingness to take this on, because it's not an easy topic. So.
Mayor, I would move to for the approval of the contract with Plummer and Associates for design and permitting of PFAS treatment at well number 7.
Move to approve resolution 21-26 by Councilmember Held. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Pro Tem Burley. Is there any discussion on the motion? Can you call the question, please?
Burley.
Yes.
Fallon.
Yes.
Gold.
Yes.
Hinkin.
Yeah.
Suffolk.
Yes.
Sherburne.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is agenda item number 4, and this is the GAP project median and roundabout sole source design contract with Norris Designs. I'll open up the public hearing and turn it over to Tony.
Kick it off, and then again, Jeff is here, and I know Norris was here.
Online, I see her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff,
Good evening
you know,
again.
yeah, once
Yep.
you kick it off, Jeff, you got a good memo.
Yeah, on my screen.
Yeah,
it's
good
not-
evening again.
Yep.
Back at the October 12th meeting, council instructed staff to make contact with Norris Designs to continue the designs and construction drawings for all of the GAP improvements, being the roundabout and the medians. Staff has done that, and Norris has turned in a proposal for a total of $94,700 to get all the way to construction drawings and some construction, looking over construction as it's going on. for both the roundabouts and the medians. Staff is recommending that we get this design done through all the public, we get it all through the public input and council input and planning commission input. And hopefully get a design that we can at least do the roundabouts in 2022. And hopefully maybe, I mean, I might be wishful thinking, but getting in there and starting construction in May, just to do the 2 roundabouts and hopefully be done with that by the end of June. I know that may be wishful thinking, but we can certainly try. And then we'll still have drawings for 2023 when we go do all the median beautifications, whatever that's going to be. So basically this proposal gets us all the way through and up to construction and a little bit of construction observation as the project goes on.
Jeff. Council, any questions for Jeff? And I see Lena Scott is from Norse Design is also on.
There she is.
Seeing no questions, I'll open it up for public comment. Anyone wishing to make a public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll close public comment. Back to council discussion and a motion.
First of all, I just want to say thank you, Jeff, for bringing this back. I love that we're building upon work that we did previously. I think this is really an exciting step that a lot of us have been excited to see coming for a long time. So thank you. I just wanted to make that comment. And is this actually should we just move to approve?
Yep.
Okay, I move to approve the GAP project median and roundabout sole source design contract with Norris Design.
And moved to approve by council member Sherburne. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by council member Fallon. Is there any discussion on the motion? Can you call the question, please?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Jenkins,
Yes.
Sherburne,
Yes.
Yes.
Aronson,
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up is agenda
Thank
item
you,
number.
council. We'll get to work.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Alana. Next up is agenda item number 5, and this is ordinance 21-13, an ordinance approving an amended plat of lots 5 through 7, replat A, River Pine subdivision to relocate portions of the town of Frisco's bike path easement over said lots. I will open up the public hearing and turn it over to Don when he's ready, but he's having.
Sorry, in this case, picture is 1,000 words to try to explain how the easement is going to be relocated.
No problem.
Cancel that. All right, so good evening again, Mayor and Council. This is first reading of ordinance 21-13, which would approve an amendment to a plat of lots 5 through 7 of River Pines subdivision for the purpose of relocating a bike path easement over those lots. Short story is back in 1991, when the River Pines development was created, the developer committed to building a bicycle path along the rear of the lots and through that development. I don't know how, but the bike path was not constructed within the easement that had been dedicated on the plat. That was recently discovered by one of the lot owners when they did an ILC because they wanted to do a deck addition to their house. So as a result, for the past year or so, we've been working with lot owners in order to relocate the easement and or to come to an agreement to relocate the easement. The other solution would have been to physically relocate the bike path into the existing easement. However, there's physical challenges and construction challenges with that because the riverbank does drop off at that location. So it'd be a practical, not impossibility, but not very practical to do so. So the lot owners are all in agreement and consenting to this. So this is a simple ordinance to effectively replat and relocate this easement. Any other questions, I'd happy to answer those. And on the screen, you can see that the darker hatched lines where the cursor is, that would be the relocated easement currently, which follows the current location of the bike path.
Questions at this time for Don? Is there anyone wishing to make public comments? Seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment and back to council discussion.
I just want to say thank you to the homeowners for being so amenable to this and cooperative, because it could definitely have gone a different way. And so here we are, and it's a good outcome. And yeah, let's move forward and correct it, get it right. So with that, sure. I move that we approve ordinance 21-13, an amended plat of lots 5 through 7, replat A River Pine subdivision to relocate portions of the town of Frisco's bike path easement over said lots.
It's been moved to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. Any discussion on the motion? Call the question, please.
Held.
Yes.
Incan.
Yes.
Sherburne.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Fallon.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bring us into executive session, then we'll take a break as we transfer over.
Oh goodness, do I have the language?
It's on the agenda.
And we've got it. Next item up is executive session.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 parentheses 4 parentheses F, personnel matters concerning the town manager performance review.
Move to enter into executive session by Mayor Pro Tem Burley. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Aronson. You call the question, please.
Incan.
Yes.
Sherburne.
Yes.
Mortensen.
Yes.
Aronson.
Yes.
Burley.
Yes.
Fallon.
Yes.
Held.
Yes.
Incan. Oh, I already said Incan. Thank you.
And for those who, Melissa and Rick switching over, we'll start this back up at 8:10. Give everybody time for take a little break. Thank you all. Thanks, staff. And more pie.